I don't really know. I mean, as an awake person, when you can't reach out to people, I mean, what are you supposed to do, and how are we supposed to keep our hopes up? I mean, it's so depressing when you think of it.
Yeah, it is, because the conditioning on most people, when you see them and they can't look you in the eye or they think you're crazy, is because the condition has taken perfectly on them. And you're looking at conditioned robots, really. They'll turn on you too. At the right time, they'll turn on you. But that's perfect conditioning. The ones who are awake generally have always been awake, or they've known something was wrong, and they can't be conditioned quite the same way. But you're in amongst most people where the conditioning has worked perfectly, and that's the problem. I've always said the elite have a symbiosis amongst the masses of people, the general mass of people, because the masses always look towards government to solve problems, even if it's a fake problem put out by the government. We immediately run to help us, save us, you know. There's only very few people in between, in the middle, who don't want to be stinking rich and rule everyone else's lives for them, and they don't want to belong to the general mob that just goes and watches all the porn on their internet all day long, or ball games or whatever. So it's a small group really who don't belong to either camp. That's a problem, because as I say, the masses have a symbiotic relationship with the elite, and eventually when they get all their agendas through, the elite will turn around and say, we couldn't have done it without you, to the masses.
Yeah, and that's such a... I think it's disgusting. There's no other word for it. It's just utterly disgusting. Yeah.
It is, and it's very depressing until you realize that you might be surprised that many of those in between who are not brainwashed or conditioned and who don't seek personal power can still have a voice and start changing things around. And that's the only hope that we have, is to postpone it at least long enough. They'll either wither away, or they'll come out with an even heavier hand. But that's when even the masses start to see it and they know something's wrong, when the heavy hand of the monster comes upon them. And that's what it might take. Stall them long enough until timetables, according to those at the top, cannot be stalled. If you can stall their timetables, they get awfully angry and they start using force. Force is, at least the use of force, terrifies the public, and maybe even to waking up a little bit. And that's all we can really hope for. It's because it's too perfect. It's been here too long, this system.
But we cannot use violence and force.
No, they're so perfectly good at getting us to kill each other or fight each other. This has been a strategy for centuries, and it's a perfect art of how to get it all going. We can't use that at all. And by the same token, we have to make sure that the elites don't come out with a heavy hand and start using open force on the general public. Here's the thing too. They have been using force, or at least deadly intentions on the general public, because they know how they've been dumbing us down. They know when they rob your mind, it's the same as killing you. And when they inject things into you too that make the autism bloom, and it also makes everyone quite a few points lower in the IQ scale, makes us all sick so that we'll die off early, infertile, etc. They are physically, literally, this is a targeting, this is a murderous rampage has been going on for a long time under the usual covert actions of the United Nations that always deny what they're doing. One of the top players in this, who wrote about it, who taught Rhodes Scholars back in the 40s and 30s, internationalist again, who spoke, by the way, so he made a great speech in Sweden, was Toynbee. There were two Toynbees, father and son, and one took over from the other. But they literally taught the Rhodes Scholars for internationalism and to penetrate all governments and push them towards internationalism. He said, we always deny with our mouths what our hands are doing. And that was to become the mantra for every organization within the United Nations. We always deny with our mouths what our hands are doing. And that's still their strategy today.
With nonsense. You don't get news anymore. You don't even get any education anymore. All by design. For those who really do value thinking, keep on doing it. And don't give up, because it's so easy just to give up and join the herd. Basically, that's what they want you to do. Give up, join the herd. They're all chewing the grass there. You just don't give up, because there's a freedom in knowing. Even if you feel helpless in the extent to what exactly to do about it all, there is a freedom in knowing what's going on. You are a creature with incredible ability of sentience. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't let the enemy turn it against you by making you depressed. Don't let that happen. And you can get through to the occasional person. Not many, doesn't take many. But occasional person in your lifetime, you can influence to them to such an extent that down the road, who knows? Who knows what can happen? That's how it's always been. Occasional one here and there, which that affects people down the road. That's how it works. That's how it really works. And that's what they really are afraid of. That's why they're monitoring everybody in such incredible real time now, to see what you're thinking or talking about or chatting about and so on. And Russell again talked about that too. Eventually we'll catch them all, he says. We'll catch them all with scientific techniques. All that time ago, before they gave you the internet. From myself, Alan Watt, from Ontario, Canada, it's good night. May your God or your gods go with you.
You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday, in the Arizona State Legislature, a bill came out of committee. It wasn't in there very long. Most bills of this nature are shelved in committee and never come out. This one breezed through committee, and now it goes up before the full House of the Arizona State Legislature. It was introduced by Representative Johnson, who was a woman, wonderful woman. In my estimation, a very brave woman. The bill states that Arizona will secede from the Union and become a sovereign nation if the federal government declares martial law, which negates the laws of the states. In other words, if the federal government declares martial law and attempts to take over the entire country, Arizona will secede from the Union and become a sovereign nation. That's the bill. I don't know if it'll pass, but it's in the, that's one of the things I love about the state of Arizona, is this is a patriot state. This is a gun state. This is a freedom state. This is a state where people still appreciate, understand, respect, and love the precepts upon which this nation was founded, the principles and ideals which has made this the greatest nation ever to exist upon the face of this earth until recent years. We are in a skid now, going downhill away from those things. But here in Arizona, that spirit still prevails. We still love freedom. Love freedom. I don't know how many of you have been to our website recently, but if you haven't been recently, you better get your little cyber selves there. Get your little cyber selves to williamcooper.net now. You'll be amazed at the changes. We have an instant replay for the Hour of the Time. For instance, 2 hours after this broadcast ends tonight, this program that you're listening to now will be on the Internet. And you'll be able to listen to it. And we will only have 4 programs on there. So Monday, as Monday's program goes on the net, last Monday's program will come off. Will come off the net. So there will always be, the last 4 broadcasts will be on the net as the instant replay. If you have a low-power FM micro-broadcasting station, feel free to broadcast the hour at the time right off the Internet. Broadcast it right off the Internet. Yeah, you'll be a couple hours late. You may even want to do it the next day, but so what? The important thing is that it's being broadcast. Pretty soon we're going to have, well, just go to the website and check it out, WilliamCooper.net. It is the #1 premium site on the entire Internet for news. You'll find links to news articles on our website you won't find anywhere else. Anywhere else, period. Period. And we go through it all over the world. Articles from papers and news outlets and media all over the world, plus what we write ourselves. And we guarantee that what you get on our website is the truth. It's always the truth, always. And so you don't have to worry about that. But, just to be on the safe side, I will give you our standard admonition, which I hope that you will continue to follow, those of you who have followed it. Listen to everyone, read everything, believe absolutely nothing unless you can prove it in your own research. Which means just because it's posted on our website, and just because I'm telling you it's the truth, does not mean that you should accept that. That's how that we got in this position that we're in today, by trusting and believing that people we thought represented us and were supposed to be doing the job that we thought they were doing. We're not. They lied to us. They've been lying to us for many years. So don't trust me either. Don't trust anybody. Always check it out. But go there, WilliamCooper.net. 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 And you'll be amazed at what you're going to find there. Don't go away. I'll be right back, because tonight I'm going to pop your bubble. I'm just going to pop it. I'm going to have no mercy. Well, we're ready now, folks. We're going to take your calls, and what I want to hear is who you're going to vote for, and I want to hear who you're going to vote for and why. 520-333-4578. This is necessary, well, to be quite honest, to set you up for what I'm going to reveal to you pretty shortly. But don't worry, you're not going to be embarrassed when you call. I just need to know who you're going to vote for and why. And I think that tonight's broadcast is going to be so eye-opening, so revealing, so shocking to you that it's going to be worth every single second that you're going to spend listening to this broadcast tonight and participating. 520-333-4578 is the number. I want you to call. I'm just going to ask you some simple questions, and I don't care how you answer them, yes or no or anything like that. It's just to set the mood for what's going to follow. And you don't have to say what your name is or anything at all. Just call, tell me who you're going to vote for, and why. And I might ask you a couple of questions about that, and then we're going to move on to the next caller. So the number is 520-333-4578. It's absolutely necessary that you participate in this little experiment here. And you'll find out why a little later in the broadcast, and you'll be glad that you participated and that we all learned something, because what you're going to learn is so important for the health, for the mental health of each and every single one of us, and to understand what's happening here. You see, because most people really don't. They haven't got a clue. 520-333-4578 is the number. And we're going to take your calls for a little bit, and then I'm going to shut off the phones, and then we're going to go into the meat of the broadcast, which you are going to find revelatory. Good evening. You're on the air.
Okay, I'll bite here.
Well, you're not biting anything. There's no trick to this. I'm not going to trap you or embarrass you or hurt you or anything like that. Okay?
I understand.
Okay.
I was leaning towards voting for a wrestler, any wrestler, until Alan Keyes came along.
Wrestler? What do you mean by wrestler?
Wrestler, Hulk Hogan, The Rock. it didn't matter who, just, anybody but Clinton, more or less, or the Democrats or the Republicans.
You were just going to write a name in.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay.
But Alan Keyes has impressed me, with his, he's just an articulate man. But then I got to ask myself, what do I know about him? And then last night he said, what has he done? Not what has he said, but what has he done? And I really don't know. So, but I am leaning towards Keyes. But the other thing that bothers me about him is that Hitler was also very articulate and, very good speaker and very good at, getting people to hear his message and stuff. So I'd have to say I'm leaning towards Keyes.
I like the fact that you made that connection between articulation and double cross. Doesn't mean that that's always the way it is, but Hitler was absolutely mesmerizing when he got up on a podium and began to speak.
And that's the way Keyes comes across. Not in the same vein as Clinton. I mean, Clinton to me has the way Hitler would do the pageantry and the flags and all this. Clinton has always just reminded me of that, especially with
symbolism.
Yeah, the symbolism.
No substance.
Using our national monuments as backdrops and things like that. But I am leaning towards Keyes.
Okay.
Okay.
I want to thank you for your participation and your contribution.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
520-333-4578. That's right, folks. Watch what they do. Look at how they vote in the Congress and what they've done in their home state and stuff like that. And don't listen to what they say, because that's never, ever, ever goes along with what they're actually doing. Good evening. You're on the air.
Oh, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Turn your radio off.
Okay, I'm doing that right now. Yeah, I'm going to be voting for Howard Phelps for the Constitution Party, also known as the U.S. Taxpayers Party. And they're pretty much pro-constitutionalists and so forth, and they believe in getting us out of the UN and also abolishing the Federal Reserve, going back to the gold supply, going back to the gold standard.
Yeah. And you think if enough people vote for them, that they'll get elected?
Well, it's just a matter of there's got to be some kind of organized opposition. I'm a member of the John Birch Society. Yeah, but we're basically like an education-oriented organization.
Excuse me, though. You didn't answer my question. Do you think that if enough people vote for them, they'll get elected?
Eventually, I would think that it's possible, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks for calling. 520-333-4578 is the number. I need your input, folks. You got to help out on this. You'll find out why later. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi, Bill.
Hi. Yeah.
Hey, bless you. Listen, I talked to Alan Keyes' party today in North Carolina.
I need to know who you're going to vote for and why.
Well, I told him I want to see Alan Keyes run for vice president with John McCain.
Yeah, but who are you going to vote for and why?
John McCain, but I want to see Alan Keyes as vice president.
That's not what I'm asking you. Why are you going to vote for John McCain?
Because I like what he says.
Okay.
He looks pretty conservative and solid.
Okay.
Of course, if it came down to the wire, I would vote for any Republican over Al Gore.
Okay.
Al Gore, he killed 7 enemy soldiers in Vietnam. He bored them to death.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me of that. Do you believe that if enough people vote for John McCain, that he'll get elected to the White House?
Yes, I think he will.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. 520-333-4578 is the number. I need you to call. Tell me who you're going to vote for and why. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi, Mr. Cooper.
Hi.
I'm not voting.
You're not voting? Why?
No. Because the president isn't elected by popular vote.
Okay. That's a good reason. Thank you very much.
Well,
520-333-4578 is the number. Who are you going to vote for? And why? Or if you're not going to vote, why? Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening, Bill. How are you?
Fine.
Well, I have an answer for your question.
Okay, I need you to talk a lot louder. Put that phone right in front of your mouth and just speak up.
I'm sorry, I'm on a cell phone. My computer's tied up with
That's
your internet broadcast.
It's okay. You can still talk louder.
Okay, is that better?
That's a little better.
Okay. I personally think it's going to come down to a draw between...
No, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you who you're going to vote for and why.
Probably Bush, but it's not going to make any difference anyway.
But why are you going to vote for Bush?
Because I can't, with a clear conscience, vote for Al Gore. And it's already been decided that Gore is going to be the president anyway by the Bilderbergers, who are the people in charge. So that's about the bottom line. We really don't have a choice.
Okay, and but do you believe if enough people really voted for Bush that he'd be elected?
No, I don't, because popular vote is no longer accepted and has not been for a number of years, which I learned before I started listening to you in 1993. And the electoral colleges are the ones who put the person in office. Clinton did not win by popular vote last time.
Okay.
And Gore is going to be your next president. As you said on your broadcast the other night, I firmly believe that.
Well, okay.
And why I'm going to vote for Bush is I just can't, with a clear conscience, vote for somebody that's been associated with Bill Clinton.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks for your call. 520-333-4578 is the number. Who are you going to vote for? Why? Or if you're not going to vote, why? Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi, Bill. Article 2.
No, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you, who are you going to vote for and why?
It doesn't really matter, Bill. I don't have a say. Electoral college.
So you're saying that you're not going to vote. Is that correct?
For the president? No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye. And why is it so hard for you guys to understand what I'm saying? All I want to hear from you is who you're going to vote and why. And then if I ask you a question, I would like for you to answer that question. That's what we're trying to do here. Good evening. You're on the air.
I'm going to vote for George W. Bush.
Okay.
Because Al Gore and Bill Bradley make me sick to my stomach, and I throw up every time I see him or hear him, and I think Bush might not be his father.
Might not. Okay. That's the first time I ever heard that. It caught me by surprise. It's pretty funny, actually. 520-333-4578. Unfortunately, he looks too much like George Bush to not be his son. The resemblance is he's Bush's son. There's no doubt about it. Good evening, you're on the air.
Bill, I'm not going to vote.
Okay.
And the reason is because I'm sick and tired of legitimizing their little fraudulent little scams.
Okay, that's a good one.
Have a good night.
Thank you for calling. That's the most intelligent reason for not voting I've ever heard in my life. And it's absolutely the truth. That's why in communist nations, they force you to vote even though there's one candidate running. Because if everybody in the country votes for him, you can't complain about what he does. Good evening, you're on the air.
Yeah, Bill, I tell you what, I'm at the point I think I'm going to vote for Al Gore, because I say, let's just get the trouble over with, and I think Gore will expedite it.
Okay.
I think a Gore election pushes it up, and I think a Bush one pushes it back.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good night.
Good night. This is it's actually getting a little bit fun. 520-333-4578 is the number. Good evening, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cooper. Who I would vote for is Mr. Keyes and Mr. Pat Buchanan.
Okay. Which one is president? I assume you're talking about them on the same ticket?
Well, I would like to see, Mr. Keyes I do like, because he's instituting once again the Constitution of this great United States of this country.
Or at least that's what he says.
Well, at least that's what he is promoting as, because none of the other candidates are coming up forward to talk about the issues at hand. They keep giving us this baloney.
Do you ever check on Alan Keyes' record as ambassador to the United Nations?
Yes, I've looked into it briefly. I don't have too much information because I'm out here in Long Beach, California.
Well, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, you have libraries, and you have a telephone, and you have access to the Internet, and you can get the voting record of every member of the United Nations, and you can see what Alan Keyes supported while he was the ambassador to the United Nations and what he didn't support. Very easy to do.
But with the candidates that we have running is all a bunch of hocus pocus once again. I don't know really who to look to, because the Democrats are just as bad as the Republicans. They're all one of the same, and they want to get us into warfare, which I believe is going to happen with Taiwan coming up in May.
Oh, hell with Taiwan. It's going to happen right here in this country.
Well, but that's going to be the instigation of everything. And being out here in Long Beach, what a lot of people don't understand is we have a lot of the Chinese people coming here in street clothes with cellular telephones. Now, what's that all about?
I don't know. But if I was there, I'd ask them.
Well, that's what I'm a communications engineer myself, Mr. Cooper, and my belief is that they're going to start cutting the lines, whether it be fiber optic, satellite communications.
Well, we're getting way off track, but it's not.
Oh yeah, it may be, but I don't have anyone else really to look forward to in this particular race.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for calling. 520-333-4578. We can do this for about 8 more minutes, and I'm going to play some music. And then I'm going to open your eyes. Wide open. And prop baseball bats under them so they won't be closed again. Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening. I'm going to vote for Bush.
Okay. Why?
He has the greater possibility of going up against Gore, if anybody does.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we have no direct impact on who gets president, symbolically we do, in the sense that, okay, I voted for him. He's going to have to answer to me at least a little bit. That's kind of the reason why I participate in the presidential voting. At least somebody's heard from me one way or another, symbolically. And
okay.
Other than that, I may not like him the best, but he has the best way of going against Gore. And he's probably a little bit better than some of the other candidates.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
520-333-4578 is the number. Need your call. Want to know who you're going to vote for and why you're going to vote for that person. Good evening, you're on the air.
William.
Yes, sir.
Scott from New York.
Hi, Scott.
I had to log off to call, so I might go over ground already covered. At the outset, there's a choice. If you vote, you tend to legitimate the regime, and of course you have no confidence that it's going to be counted right. But I say vote, from my perspective. So then when you look at the crop this year, Alan Keyes is the only one that's uttering anything close to the truth and articulating any of the ideas that I'm for. So I say vote for him and make it a poll, in a sense. Okay. At least there's a percentage in front of the public's eye of people who agree with the man.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you for calling. 520-333-4578 is the number. And just want to hear from you and know who you're going to vote for and why. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hello, Bill. How are you?
Fine.
This is Dave from Wisconsin.
Hi, Dave. I need you to talk louder, Dave.
Okay. If my vote even counted, I wouldn't vote for any of the pukes that are running right now. So.
Who would you vote for? You know, there's a space where you can write somebody in.
Oh, I guess I didn't think of that. I won't even vote because my vote don't count.
So you're not going to vote because your vote doesn't count?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
520-333-4578. I know there's a lot of people out there shaking their heads on every answer that we've had here. Good evening, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Bill.
Good morning.
Well, afternoon, that is. I was going to vote for Alan Keyes, but I'm going to write in Michael New's name now.
Michael New? Okay.
Because Alan Keyes said that he should be court-martialed for not wearing the union uniform.
Oh, somebody is paying attention, huh?
And he is the only young man.
Now, why do you think Alan Keyes said that if he's really against the United Nations like he says he is?
Yeah, I know. He's an insider. Just like Pat Buchanan. I voted for Pat Buchanan every primary he's ever been in.
Yeah, you feel kind of betrayed?
Yes, I do. See, I'm a son of a Confederate veteran, and he speaks this speak in all the southern states, and he gets us all riled up, and we listen to him, and we run to the polls and vote for him, and we get Clinton.
That's because you're listening to him and not studying his history and what he's done and what he really stands for.
Absolutely.
You have to understand that in this country today, not one single honest, legitimate patriot could ever have a column carried by newspapers all over this country.
Oh, absolutely.
Or be a co-host on the firing line.
Absolutely.
Or anything else like that in the establishment media.
Will you run for president?
Will I run for president?
Yes, sir.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not in this country today. I wouldn't stand a chance of going 2 blocks when they'd kill me real quick.
I understand.
And I'm not afraid of dying. It just would be a futile gesture.
Oh, I understand.
I will be a better person leading troops in a battle than I will be dead trying to run for president.
Well, a martyr accomplishes nothing.
Well, that's not true. A martyr forms tremendous political movements. What do you think? You ever hear of Nelson Mandela?
Yes, sir.
South Africa would never have fallen if they had not put Nelson Mandela in prison 50 years ago.
Well, I know. And nobody understands that he was in prison for throwing a hand grenade on the school bus.
Yeah.
They don't tell you that.
But he became a martyr for the communist blacks in Africa, and South Africa is now a communist country with a communist leader because the South African government made Nelson Mandela a martyr.
Yes.
And if they hadn't done that, none of it would have ever happened. Now, I'm not saying that apartheid was right. I'm against racism. I don't care how it is. I'm just stating a fact of how that country came to fall.
I understand. Another question. I'm in North Carolina.
Well, we don't have time for that. We need to get on and get other people in here.
God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
God bless you, too. 520-333-4578. Who are you going to vote for and why? Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi, I'm going to pencil myself in.
First, I need you to put your mouth in front of your phone and talk real loud, please.
I'm going to pencil myself in.
Okay. And why?
Because I'm the only one I can trust to restore constitutional government.
Well, that sounds like a damn good reason to me. Thanks very much for your input. It really does, folks. Okay. Phones are closed. The phones are now closed. So stay tuned. I'm going to really shock some of you. It's going to be a revelation here. Poor fools living under the delusion that the president cares what he thinks. And as bad as that may sound, it's absolutely true. I want you to all listen to me very carefully. You are being led into an illusion that the popular vote elects the president. The purpose of that is to convince you that this nation is a democracy, which it is not, never was, and never could be. Get that through your thick heads. This is a constitutional republic where your vote counts is on a local level. You can elect local officials and state officials. Above that, you have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with it. The federal government has no jurisdiction within the states. Listen to me carefully. The federal government has no jurisdiction within the territorial boundaries of the states, and therefore cannot request you to vote, nor can your vote count. You vote for your local officials, city, county, and state. That's as far as your vote counts, period. Oh, I know I'm really making some of you mad right now. You're jumping up and hopping around on one leg and hitting, bouncing off the wall. Who is this guy? How dare he say that? I dare it because I have a brain and I use it, which is more than I can say for most of you. And we heard from our callers, people who are not stupid people, but they are ignorant. They're probably some of the best people you could ever meet or know in your life, and their calls represented the majority of this audience. Some of them knew exactly where I'm going, but I wouldn't let them say it because it would have defeated the purpose of the first half of the broadcast. Some of them understood that their vote was futile, but they didn't really know why. And some of them really honestly believe that their vote is going to help elect the next president of the United States of America. And I'm telling you right now, nothing could be farther from the truth. This is a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Understand that. And understand that you are citizens of sovereign states, not citizens of the United States, unless you live in a territory or in the 10-mile square area known as Washington, D.C., or within the boundaries of dockyards, forts, things of that nature, where the actual land has been deeded to the federal government, but more important, jurisdiction has been ceded and deeded by the legislature of the state upon which that land sits, or within whose boundaries that land sits. Outside of those areas, the federal government has absolutely no jurisdiction, and you have no say in what the federal government does. The contract is not between the people and the federal government, it's between the states and the federal government. I hate to tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, but the states elect the president, not you. And here's how they do it. It's a shame that so many people who profess to be so intelligent and so well educated and so knowledgeable can't obtain a copy of a very short document written by geniuses who understood the English language better than any of us ever will, who penned the greatest document ever to come from the mind of man, that set men free upon the face of this earth for the first time in the history of the world, and set up checks and balances so that a democracy of uneducated, ignorant voters could not determine the future of this country. They didn't want a mob of ignorant people to determine who led this nation. And they outlined exactly how it was to operate in Article 2 of the Constitution for the United States of America. It is not the Constitution of the United States of America. It's the Constitution for the United States of America. If you don't believe me, read it. Article 2, Section 1. The executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. He shall hold his office during the term of 4 years, and, together with the Vice President, chosen for the same term, be elected as follows. Do you know what that means? That means I am now going to tell you how the President is elected, and he cannot be elected in any other manner. Listen carefully. It's going to shock some of you. Some of you may even have a heart attack hearing this. So, before I start, get someone, if you have a weak heart and you really are upset about this so far, to call your doctor and have them on standby. Each state shall appoint. Listen to me carefully. Each state shall appoint. In such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress, but no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for 2 persons, of whom one at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves, and they shall make a list of all the persons voted for, and of the number of votes for each, which list they shall sign and certify and transmit sealed to the seat of the government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes shall be the President. If such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if there be more than one who have such majority, and have an equal number of votes, then the House of Representatives shall immediately choose by ballot one of them for President. And if no person have a majority, then from the 5 highest on the list, the said House shall, in like manner, choose the President. So all this stuff about getting signatures and getting put on the state ballot for the popular vote, it's all bullshit. It's all crap. It's a lie. No one has to register for anything. No one has to have any certain number of signatures. No one has to get on a state ballot. The electors are free to vote for whomever they wish. Has nothing to do with the popular election. Has nothing to do with who is nominated by the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or the Reform Party or anything else. The electors may choose whomever they want in any way that they want. They are free to vote for whoever they want. They're free to elect me president if they want. No state can make any law to the contrary. In the law, no state can make any law which contradicts the Constitution for the United States of America. The way the president is elected is exactly the way I have just read to you, and in no other manner is it ever done. The popular election is a fraud. It's a lie. It's a scam. It's designed to make you believe this is a democracy, so that if they have the majority of the votes for whomever they choose to put in the White House and destroy this country, they blame it up on you because, quote, you elected them, unquote. The truth is you had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with it. Not now, not yesterday, not last year, not 20 years ago, not 100 years ago, and not in November. That's the truth of the matter. This nation was set up so that the people elected their local officials. They sent their representatives to their state house. Their state house determined the relationship between the state and the federal government. Up until an amendment was passed, the senators were appointed by the legislatures of the state, not elected by the people, so that there would be a balance, a check and balance in place to make sure that the sovereignty of each individual state was never destroyed by the federal government. This is a nation of sheep who think they are Americans but know absolutely nothing of what an American is, or what this government is, or how it runs, or how it's supposed to run. And now I hear people saying, well, if I don't vote, I can't complain. That's not true. In a constitutional republic, it doesn't matter whether you vote or not. The Constitution is there to protect each individual from the tyranny of government. Every individual, whether they vote or not, whether they're gay, whether they're straight, whether they are handicapped, whether they are blind, whether they are the governor of a state or the poorest member of a state, their rights are protected. And their place in this nation is secure. But the scum-sucking, lying, jack-booted, Nazi, thug, puke-faced, socialist, pig commies in government now are destroying all of that. And the way they're destroying it is by rearranging your brain cells so you don't understand or even give a damn about how any of it works. And you've all been lied to. You've all been taught that the law is something that's complicated. You couldn't possibly understand it, so don't you dare go and look. And you fall right into that. The supreme law of the land is the Constitution for the United States of America. It dictates what the government is and what it is not, what it can do and what it cannot do, what powers it has and what powers it does not have, and what powers it does not have rest with the states or to the people. It's really very simple. The Constitution for the United States is 7 short, very clear, very well written, and easily understandable articles. And you're all so damn scared of reading it. You're all so scared of picking up this little bitty document and reading it so that you'll know who you are and what this nation is and how it's supposed to operate, instead of the lies and the scam and the frauds and the con that you're subjected to on a daily basis. And whoever they put in the White House will have carte blanche to do whatever he or she wishes to do because you elected them. Oh boy. You guys have you've really done it this time. I got to tell you, it's amazing. Well, the phones are open again, 520-333-4578. Now let's hear what you think about it. If it made you angry, that's fine. Call. As long as you're polite. You know, I won't hang up on you. If you're not polite, that's when you get gone. 520-333-4578. If you don't like what I said, don't take it out on me. Tell it to Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, and all the boys. Good evening. You're on the air.
That was very excellent. That's completely 100% correct.
Yeah.
And
shocking, isn't it?
That's something the kids should be taught in high school. I know I was. I don't know what they're doing these days.
I was too. We had a class called Civics.
Yeah, everybody knew about the electoral college when I was in high school. I have no idea what they know now. But,
yeah.
Very good work, though. Continue on.
Thank you.
Bye.
520-333-4578 is the number. Boy, wait till Myrna Udall hears about this. She'll probably be in the hospital for 6 months. I hope not. She's a fine lady, but she's deluded. Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening, Bill. Nice to see you tonight. Good show.
Thank you.
I wouldn't vote for any of them. And one of the things I think that needs to be brought
Well, wait a minute. You missed the whole point.
What?
It wouldn't matter if you did or not.
Well, I know that. I understand that. But here's the issue. They have to have the votes to keep their scam going.
They have to have the votes to make you believe that what they do has been mandated by the people.
Okay, if the voting drops,
doesn't matter whether it drops. If only 2 people vote, they both vote for one person. They were elected by a mandate of the people, and they can say the people elected this person. It's the people's fault. They wanted us to do this, and that's what they're doing because they elected us.
That's exactly correct.
If only 2 people in the whole country voted.
Well,
that's exactly what they would say, because nobody counts the votes. Nobody cares. And the media doesn't report votes. They report percentages. So that you'll never know that people aren't voting anymore.
Well, have a good night. Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Why do you think they shifted to percentages, folks? Because they don't want you to know that nobody gives a damn anymore. People are so disillusioned in this country that most people aren't even voting anymore. In the last mayoral election in Los Angeles, California, less than 6% of the eligible voters voted, and the percentage of eligible voters compared to the population that could have been eligible to vote had they registered, was only about 40%. So that means nobody elected the mayor of Los Angeles. Good evening. You're on the air.
Bill, this is Scott again from New York.
Hi, Scott.
The point, though, is that the electors are under some pressure. That pressure is public opinion.
No, they're not under any pressure because the public doesn't even know who the hell they are.
That is true.
Do you know who the electors in your state are?
No, but...
And they know that. So they vote any way they want to and go home and sleep and feel good because most people don't even know that electors elect the president, don't even know electors exist. They think the popular vote elects the president. And if you're voting on computers, the number is skewed to make you believe that you elected the guy that's in the White House, whether the vote came out that way or not. And not only that, but you don't even get to pick who runs. It's picked by other people. So it doesn't really matter who wins or loses. It's still their man.
Has anybody ever done a study, state by state, to determine what the popular vote was and if the elector's decision comported with that?
Not that I know of.
Right. That would be the test. And in Republican terms,
the test wouldn't mean a thing today if you're voting on computers.
Right.
Once you make a vote, you don't know where that electron went, and you don't know if the vote count is accurate or if it was skewed in the software or some point along the line to make sure that who they want in the White House got the number of votes that they needed to make the people think that they elected them.
When that was instituted, Bill, the idea was that if there was a tumultuous time and some Democrat demagogue ran amok, that there was an insulation between the federal government and that.
That's right. I'm not complaining about the method that the Founding Fathers put into operation to elect the president.
Right.
My point is that the American people don't have well, I almost did it.
Yeah, that's absolutely
almost
true.
Said that word. They don't have a clue. They don't have a clue. They don't know what's going on. They are falling into the hands of the communists of the world, and they are about, you see, we're not being invaded from without. There is nobody in this whole world that could take this country by military force or any other way. We're being destroyed from within by subversive forces in this country, and the American people are so damn stupid, they don't have a clue.
Absolutely true. I'll clear the line.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Well, folks, that's it. I hope you've all learned something. Get a copy of the Constitution and read the damn thing. It's short. It's easy. It's simple. It's written in English, not Swahili. Read Patriots by Languth. Langguth. Read it. For once in your life, please figure out who you are, where we came from, why we're here, what it's all about. Learn what America is and what Americans are. And damn it, either get with the program or get the hell out. Because there's going to be a civil war. And I got to tell you something, folks. If we don't straighten this out peacefully by understanding these things, a lot of people are going to die. And neither side is going to accept fence sitters. You're going to get the dog crap kicked out of you. And you don't even have a clue that these things are on the horizon. Good night. God bless each and every single one of you. May God save this great republic. The only nation in the world that ever set people free and gave them a chance. Good night, Annie Poon Allison. I love you with my heart and soul.
Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt. This is Cutting Through the Matrix on November the 5th, 2017. First of all, I'd like to mention that you should all congratulate yourselves if you haven't gone insane up till now, because of the changes that are
on cue, across the board at the same time, step by step, in different areas, being implemented across the planet, with news and everything else, all changing again to the next step and the next step at the same time. Very obvious, isn't it? And I said back in 2001 that the hardest thing from then on you would find is holding on to your sanity, as the massive changes were implemented across the world and across your countries, because that was the big agenda. They published a lot of it before 2001 happened, and they needed the big event to make it happen, and they rammed it through. And they're still going today. They haven't stopped. Big plans, big agenda. And now you've seen everything happen, in fact, right down to changing genders and things like that as being priorities. Even to get loans from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. That's part of the stipulations to push all that forward at the very top of all your priorities in different countries across the planet. And folk will never figure out why. I've said many years ago that anything that really has any ability to change society, and that you hear about, and it gets lots of publicity, is from the top down. It's never from the grassroots. It might be offered to you, oh, it's from the grassroots. No, it's not. Never has been. Nothing gets ahead from the grassroots unless it's authorized and created generally by those at the top. Even Plato talked about that as well. Everything had to come from the top down. Otherwise, you'd lose control of society for those who already own it. And it is owned. The culture's owned. Everything's owned. Everything you take for granted has been given to you. Because you're natural people. People are like any other species that you can study of creatures on the planet. And we all have our traits and customs and things like that. And we have drives as well. And it's all been used against us all. Well, not all of us. There are some exceptions, but the target populations that they want to basically reduce, wipe out even some of them, it's rather evident and out in the open now as to what they want to do. They certainly don't want certain people to breed, that's for sure. And there's professors coming out. I won't go into it too, because everything is sensationalism now, isn't it? That's the substitute for news now. There's a technique with it too. It's mainstream and across the board, even in what used to be called the Patriot Movement, which isn't that anymore either. Everything's been taken over and changed. Everything has been changed. Haven't you noticed? Or have you? Have you noticed? I bet you haven't. If you follow it all the time, you won't notice it. It's like everything else. You're gradually led along, thinking it's just it's a little bit different, but no, it's completely changed. You're always being manipulated by anything that you follow, and anything that's authorized from the top. But getting back to holding on to your sanity, it hasn't stopped, and it won't stop, because there's a war upon you, a complete war. Many of the organizations in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, big organizations, and so-called respectable organizations, they had their own institutes, etc., they came out as to their agenda and what they wanted to do. It's not conspiracy when they publish their big plans to the general populace. And when you quote them back today, you just quote what they've published. You're suddenly a conspiracy theorist. That's a simple technique of ridiculing you, isn't it? Very simple. Just too simple, in fact. I haven't read tonight about Carl Quigley, who I just looked up his wiki again to see what they said. And they're already trying to whitewash the comments, actually more than comments. They wrote books about it, about the Round Table Societies and the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations and so on, because he was the historian. They have their own archives and their own professional historians writing their version of history. And no wonder it's a better version of history than the rubbish they decide to give you. And I'm not kidding about that, that's a fact. And he was all for their agenda too. But now they're trying to whitewash it, saying, well, he just had some strange idea as being an Irish descendant. And this is no kidding you in the wiki. because he was too open about it all. And he published a big book, Tragedy and Hope, in the Anglo-American establishment, and laid a lot of it out in the line, including how it started up in England, London, with the Milner Group and the Cecil Rhodes Foundation, which merged together with a big, big agenda. And don't think for an instant that this was all to do with the creation of some white supremacist thing running the world. It was not at all. That's the big joke. And it also was to bring in a whole world system of governing. But it was also to enrich those who set it up, even more than they were already enriched, by grabbing resources. And of course they and their own families and offspring would manage and own these resources, you see, as the nations were used to go across the world. Just like they're still going today, using the US, grabbing oil fields and all the rest of it, and mineral rights, and you name it. Hasn't stopped. Behind every great sounding cause, there's always a big con going on. There really is. There really, really is an incredible con going on behind every. I even read there about, I think, was it another scandal within one of the big charitable organizations, and how they'd raised so much money. This wasn't the Clinton bunch, this was another bunch for Haiti, I think it was, and their own staff had absconded with millions of dollars. It might even have been the Red Cross or something. I might look for it tonight and see if I can find it and find out which one it was. But yeah, millions of bucks just went disappeared. Everything today is corrupt. But it really, when you look back on it, it really always was. I've mentioned before that the Cold War was fascinating to me, because here we are supposedly going to get nuked at any time at all, until we started yawning and it didn't work anymore on the general public. But we're going to get nuked, and we're supposed to be living in fear. And our government, oh please save us, build more Polaris missiles and Trident missiles and all these missiles that are going to save us by blowing up the planet. It was quite so. And the House of Lords and every member of Parliament wanted to keep in as long as they could, regardless of the party. And the Labour Party in Britain had as much communist really as Labour. I don't know what the difference was really, because they even years later came out with the Foot. I think it was Foot, or it was Michael Foot, or one of the Foots anyway, left foot or the right foot, I don't know. But came out and admitted he was a communist all along. And of course the secret services and so on that managed Britain, they knew all this stuff. But anyway, everybody in the political system in Britain, regardless of the party, simply wanted to get in there and stay as long as they could and get into the House of Lords, get made a Lord, and then they could really go to they had inside information on what companies were going to get the new missile contracts and stuff, guaranteed payment by the British taxpayer, guaranteed, so they could fix their own whatever sums they wanted to prices on it, and the government would make sure that the taxpayer would pay it all. It was great business. And every other month it was, the Russians want to counter this one. We need another one to counter that one, which has just countered ours. And they go on with this nonsense of missiles and mark this and mark that. Quite amazing. And the US was doing the same thing. I remember watching once before actually the Berlin Wall came down. It was an awfully good documentary. And it was done in Britain. And at that time, at least there were some people in Britain getting fed up with it all and saying, for goodness sake, this has dragged on our whole darn lives and nothing's happening. And we know it's a farce and so on. And sure enough, I am pretty certain on a higher level, above all the troops and so on, and border guards and yada yada, a high level. There was never ever any fear of having an atomic war between the people who really ruled Russia and the ones who really ruled Britain. Probably the same bunch. But anyway, I can remember they showed you a documentary by the CIA, quite a few documentaries that they've been behind putting out there, and they're terrifying the Americans and say, "Oh, look at this! This looks like an Islamic mosque in one of the Soviet bloc countries. Look at that! He's another one. He's another one. These are really covers. Inside them, there's big nuclear rockets inside their missiles. Utter tripe. You wouldn't believe it. It was like that movie, The Mouse That Roared, and then had the trip to the moon by the same makers of the movie. It's really good. It's a comedy. And in the one where they went to the moon, you find that this little piddly country that was dead broke, that kept getting things thrown at them because the US and the Soviet Union wanted to show off that they were going to give them donations of money and so on. And they were given a Russian rocket, which they converted and took it to the moon. Anyway, the comical part was they used a tower of the castle to put it in so that no one would see it or be offended. Well, it's just the same way as the CIA was doing it and showing you all these mosques and supposedly inside was these massive multi-megaton missiles. What a joke. Then, of course, after the Cold War, they showed you inside these places with the staircases, and nothing had ever been in there as in missile department. But again, facts don't matter when you're ruled by hype and psychology and behaviorism and your natural tendency to believe those who are in charge of what you see as your tribe. With the US, it's a super tribe. That's what it was called by Desmond Morris a long time ago. A super tribe of many different groups and so on. At the bottom, that is. All believing that those in the top are taking care of them. They're the tribal leaders. And they train you awfully well to believe that. But you also have that natural instinct to want to believe them, don't you? It's a natural instinct. I mean, you understand why there's so many pills and all that. But apart from the crazy, unreal system we live in today, but all these tranquilizers and antidepressants and all the rest of it, we shouldn't need them in a natural setting. It wouldn't, occasionally somebody who's been knocked in the head might need something like that, but you wouldn't need all the stuff that you have today in a natural setting. There's nothing natural about it, naturally, or unnaturally, whatever you want to call it. But the fact is, we're living in a system, amazing system, where you are trained using your natural abilities against you to obey those at the top who will save you. That's what they're there for. They really are. Do you look at the media? Have you ever seen how they take pictures of leaders and they're always standing there with their mouth open and the fingers pointing and they look so resolute? And that's the image they want to project to you. That's what it is. And it's all perception management. Perception builds the imagery inside your mind of these strong people who are somehow more intelligent than you and stronger than you and more virtuous. They like that term, virtue. They're more virtuous than you. We're all trained to believe it. And in a natural setting, as I said, we wouldn't be neurotic about it. We would expect them to take care of the little tribe, the little band in a small setting. And it would work there. Because if it didn't, you could put another person in as the chief for a little while. Quite easy to do. But once you have a big army there in a nation, that's a bit harder, isn't it? And if you're stuck with them until the next election, it doesn't make any difference though, because every party is the same. They all have to go to the same schools. It's a class. Not just a middle or an upper class. No, this is a class into itself. They're all born around, generally, Washington, D.C. in the States, and Ottawa and Canada has the same. They all have hills, and they're the houses where all the bureaucrats live. And even the bureaucrats intermarry each other intergenerationally. Same in Britain. And that's how it really is. And they really are there to protect the system of the big corporate owners of massive corporations, international corporations and so on. That's what they're there to do. That's why they have special outlets from bureaucracies and departments for the public relations departments and they train folk at universities in how to, don't tell the public the truth. Tell them, you can lighten the load a certain way or whatever by saying it this way, so you can get taught to lie to the public. And you get a degree for it. That's a system in which we live. And we're taught that this is normal. Now, it doesn't work that way. As I say, you go through Cold Wars, and since, even long before 9/11 happened in 2001, The US was already continuously bombarding countries in the Middle East with cruise missiles and that for years. That kind of thing going on. And then Bush Sr., of course, had these no-fly zones and all that, and across different areas, and that lasted all the way up into, from Gulf War I, Desert Storm, into the next one, which hasn't stopped. Continuous war. And during those wars, everything's changed. You've lost everyone's lost, across the world, their rights and freedoms. And corporations that own technologies now rule our lives. They know everything about us. And your governments quite happily stamp, because that's what governments do, they stamp approval to all these private corporations to give them powers over the general populace. And we think, we're getting taught now this is normal. A lot of the youngsters now think it is normal because that's all they know. And to be good and approved by society, you must be stamped okay and safe, meaning all your data's up there and you shouldn't bitch about things. And there's what's wrong with them all knowing you've got nothing to hide and that nonsense, eh? But the system, with all of its wars and its constant inflation, as they keep devaluing the currencies of all the countries, it gets worse and worse. So folk end up getting all their pills and tranquilizers and antidepressants and so on, because we're not living in a natural system, and your tribal leaders don't seem to be representing you at all, do they? The beauty of it is today is that the tribal leaders are serving other people. But again, in this system of so many people at the top, and families, names, you can't name them. They're kind of faceless. They're kind of faceless, aren't they? And it's harder to pinpoint what's happening when there's so many faceless people running it all. The average person doesn't even know how many bureaucrats there are who are working on documentation to do with them, yourselves, at the moment, from your local council or township to your city and so on, and who could be renewal of your driving licenses and various other things. That you have no idea how many folk, bureaucrats, faceless ones, are all working on things to do with you right now. It could be your health care, things like that. Stacks and stacks of bureaucrats, faceless bureaucrats. And when it comes down, as they're introducing all the laws for this mandate to change the entire way that you live, using as the excuse global warming, which they changed to climate change, because global warming wasn't going along with it at the time. And before that, remember, they had the coming ice age, and that didn't cooperate either. But it doesn't put them off. They never change their plans. And when they do it in unison, and they pledge to do it in unison, it's a very, very interesting technique that's used, this pledge where they must swear that an oath, all together, all for one for all. That's what they do. For those who don't get it, they actually do this. And they'll all come out and lie at the same time, even when the lie seems to be wearing thin. They'll keep doing it all together, using the same slogans and so on, and weapons of mass destruction, or whatever it happens to be. That's how it's done. And they have psychological experts training them on how to put this across. In marketing and publicity and public relations, as like to call it. And that way the general public think, well, surely they're not all wrong. And that's how you start caving into it all. Oh, maybe they're right. They can't all be lying. Oh, yeah, they can. Yeah, they can. You won't find politicians who actually believe that. The people who've been there for a few years, if they can survive that long, are part of the team then. And you won't find one of them who really believes the public have a right to know anything. You won't find them. They don't exist. They don't. You're trained to believe you have rights. Now, you try to extract anything out of government, it's almost impossible. You know, even when you go to the post office, which is government run still in some countries, and I've done it before, to post something off, and I'll notice as I'm handing it over, and the person holds it behind the counter, grabs it, I just notice there's one extra little thing I haven't put in it. Like the last part, or maybe the postal code it clears it, and I'll hold on to it. Well, they pull out your hands, because it's law. It's then their property. It's theirs. It's technically their property, and by their rules, the person that it's been sent to. but not yours. You just pay for it. So you have no idea of the different rules and regulations that they have. You don't have all the rights that you think you have. You're not dealing with normal citizens, people who help each other out, neighbours and things like that. You're not dealing with that. No, you're dealing with authorities. And they don't really believe they have the right then to be different than you. They don't believe that they're servants. They never have. And again, they train you, but they call them public servants. No, they're not. They're not serving you. They're serving, all right, but not you. No, they're serving the ones who run your country and own it. But yeah, how many bureaucrats are working on you every day, I wonder, eh? Because we all get it. We're all getting assessed all the time with all your electronic this and electronic that, and adding to your profile, and tested all the time, and little pop-ups and things, see if you click them on or off, all that kind of stuff. You're constantly being tested, constantly. And then you have all the different agencies from your local, say, police, for instance, and then up to other agencies, and even in Canada, for instance, you have intelligence divisions working, which are part of, say, the Ontario Provincial Police. All the provinces have them, and you have them in Ontario too. The Ontario Provincial Police have their intelligence division, and they'll have their own little runs as well on tests. And they'll have so many different names for the tests. For instance, let's pick all this bunch here and do tests on them, and they got to find out everything they can about you in a very short space of time using all the tools at their command. We're constantly, you have no idea how important we all are. You have no idea at all. All these folk living off of us, and now they're living off our data. It's quite fascinating, isn't it? I should say, and I still do, that, for instance, people who make things, say in small businesses who actually, and we had countries that were completely self-sufficient, you know that? When it came to industry and all that. There was nothing, from a nail file to whatever, all made in your own country. And in no time at all, everyone's forgotten. Isn't that amazing how fast? Because they're distracted by all their TV entertainment and stuff like that. They don't seem to notice so much. Most folk don't. But it's all made in China now. All of it. We just don't notice what's happening today. But here we are. I mean, we're living in a system where we're so important to the masters, and we're consumers. And if we're not consuming, we're bad citizens. That's what the United Nations pretty well said. Their definition of a good citizen was a good producer and consumer. And if you're doing nothing but consuming, then you're now classified as a bad citizen, global citizen. That won't go on forever, folks, because we're living through the big changes now as they bring in, it's your fault the climate's like this. It's all your fault. Nothing to do with earthquakes and big crustal changes from the planet, because it does that. The big plates, as they call it, are moving. You get earthquakes, etc., etc. You get volcanoes. You get undersea volcanoes. There's more undersea volcanoes than you ever imagine, which warm the waters and eventually rise into the air too. That's got nothing to do with it, they claim, and the sun's got nothing to do with it. It's all your fault because it's a political agenda. And the agenda is to blame you for everything. Everything. It's all your fault. And they're going to change your entire way of living. They've always had this agenda for changing your entire way of living. They needed the excuse to do it. I've gone through the story so many times, I'm sick of hearing it myself from my own mouth. And the Club of Rome was given the task of finding a way to blame the public, and then they could convince the public it was their fault. And they came up with the idea of drought and famine and the like from global warming, all that stuff would fit the bill, and man then would be classified as the enemy of the planet. And they haven't stopped, and here we are. And it won't change. I said a while back too that, for instance, Obamacare was not going to go away. When your government, like everything else, governments work. The true capitalist system is where governments are simply there to rubber stamp big sales, mandatory sales, paid for generally by the taxpayer, on behalf of the big corporations. and generally international corporations. That's what their job is. That's what it is. And forget all this fascist rubbish that they're putting out there and stuff like that. Fascism is socialism. The German National Socialism, they call it Nazi, that was socialism. Communism, as Stalin and then Khrushchev said too. Really, communism was socialism in a hurry. It's always socialism. And when they first called something fascist, it was to do with the Italian Mussolini system that came in when everything came to a halt, when the communists were trying to take over Italy. Nothing worked. Again, the old joke was the trains didn't work, which they didn't. Nothing came on time, and things like that. Strikes everywhere, and folk couldn't even get work, in fact, because you had to belong to one or the other parties. That was all you were asked before you could get employed. And so the whole country was grinding to a halt. And along came Mussolini, who was socialist, by the way. He ran the socialist paper for years before he got up there and became the leader. And he worked with, it was different from the capitalist system, he worked with the corporations, which you need for the country, because there's essential things that you must have. And he worked with all the other peoples as well, the workers and so on. The two, and they forced both of them to work together. That's really and then they called that fascism. And they went off on a rampage to start conquering Ethiopia and different places too. They always do that because they end up needing some way of bringing in more taxes, in a sense, from other peoples. That's what empires really initially were about. Even Britain did that in India, because India had its feudal system in India with its caste system and the Brahminist system, where if you were a Brahmin, for instance, a family of Brahmins over a certain area, you lived off the taxation of the people and their produce and all the rest of it. Kind of like Britain did too. And then when Clive of India, they came to arrangements with these top people to share the taxes, to get that's what a lot of the rebellions are about, is because Britain wanted to get some of the taxation off them and to share it with those who owned and ruled Britain. And that caused a lot of trouble naturally too. So anyway, getting back to what the point is, we're living in a basically a system where we are trained not to see what's happening. When you can get the books put out by the organizations who've created the histories, like the Royal Institute for International Affairs, the Lord Alfred Milner Group, that even Winston Churchill in Parliament, when he was left out of the loop at one point, he says there is an organization, he says, which has been running the affairs of Britain, including the wars, behind the backs of the politicians, he says. And he screamed about it in Parliament in one of his talks. And he was talking about the Milner Group. At that time, the politicians knew it existed. They just didn't know what it was even called. They knew some of the members of it, but they didn't know what it was called, because it was so secretive, the way that they operated. And that's what Quigley said too when he became the historian of it. And especially the American branch, which is called the Council on Foreign Relations. And he says his contribution to history, the creation of history, was so important that he thought it should be published. But that put them into panic, because they didn't want the public to know they were behind so much of even the wars. And wars still to come too, of course. That's reality. And remember too that there's hardly I don't think there's a big media out there doesn't have most of its top journalists are members of the CFR. You've got to always standardize the news to keep it from the public and give them rubbish. For news just means data, dumps of data. And I said years ago too, but it's true, the big move to bring in, I can remember when I was young in Britain, small, and you got a guy coming out, he would come on the BBC every night, and he would read the news. There was no hype or music behind it. There was no jump into this and jump into that and then bursts of music to shock you out your seat and all this nonsense that they've got. It was just a guy sitting behind a desk, and he read it. He read the news. Initially, he did read it from a paper on his desk. Eventually, he would hold the paper and be nothing on it, and would read on a dummy board. But I couldn't figure out, even as a youngster, why this guy got this great award when he was retiring. He'd been there for years and years, apparently, and he'd helped to shape the culture of Britain on behalf of those who managed Britain. That's why he was getting all these rewards. He has a nice face. You trusted the guy. He seemed sincere. And that's why, and he was paid big money just for reading this propaganda. But at least he didn't have all the hype. And it was years eventually before they started to bring in a sports section at the end of the news. Even then, I think it was only towards the Friday, because the sports would be on the Saturday, so they'd have a little bit extra just for the sports, what was coming up the next day. Just a little bit, but not much, and pretty well nothing to do with what they called variety, which was entertainment. Eventually, of course, they started bringing in mainly they watched the US. They started bringing the Hollywood types, that nonsense, you see, and that was part of the technique too, to wean the public without them knowing about it into listening to the little gossip and sexual stuff to do with Hollywood. Because you see, you're an animal too, and anything to do with sex, you want to know about it. Oh, well, yeah, you essentially can't really ignore it. But it's all distractions. It's a primal instinct, drive, incredible drive. And they know how to use it against you. They've always used sex against you. Even in ancient times, they well understand how to do it. But so you've got all this nonsense delivered today under the guise of being called news, but it's nonsense, it's rubbish. Look down the sides of all these awful papers, and there's nothing in it except nonsense. And this fading beauty from Hollywood, and here's her latest facelift and whatever lift she's had, and yada, yada, yada. One after the other, hundreds of them, I think. And there's no news. There's no news. Everything that's classified as news, in a sense, or even vaguely resembles news, is actually handouts by military organizations or fronts for the military organizations or fronts for the government itself. Handouts. No one goes around anymore and asks questions. They're all sitting behind just like everybody else on their internet, just collecting whatever comes across their desktop on the internet. That's the difference, isn't it? And they haven't stopped, as I say, because they've made it quite clear that things are going to get a lot worse because it's planned that way. If you have, say, an old-fashioned, if you had a British system with the British people, say, around 1950, 60, who are putting up with no work or hardly any work, it's all service economy, pretty well no manufacturing, in other words, and all the different stages of manufacture from raw materials. These were all massive businesses all the time, everywhere you looked, all gone. Then you start bringing in more and more people all the time into an island. If it did float, I tell you, it had been sunk long ago with the weight in it, with the people coming in. And they know this too from the top. Anybody who's left working in the service economy, I've got to support all the ones coming in all the time. And all the refugees too on top. And then when you have massive clashes, which you do have, which of course is planned this way, people coming in who are not too happy, and other ones want to come in, because that does all when the communists, for God's sake, from before World War II, they know exactly, all the intelligence agencies know exactly how it works. If you're at war on a people or with a people across the world, then those people will generally try to infiltrate your country to cause mayhem by sending people over as refugees. They had it in the 1920s and 30s after the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. And there's books out and published at the time to watch out for them, etc. And sure enough, you certainly had lots of the communist ones infiltrating all across Britain. Some of them got into government, lots of them went to universities to teach. That never stopped. And other ones were into subversion by any means they could. And subversion of the culture is the first thing they go for. And you also have ones, when you had the war with Germany, the same thing. They were paranoid against anybody who was of German ancestry in case they would be sympathetic to Germany and start doing what they call the fifth column work inside Britain. Today, they bring them in, no darn well, and suddenly it's not going to happen now, of course, with the countries you're at war with at the moment. Of course it is. So each time you get more and more things happening that are terrible for the people, you're getting told to accept it. Same in the US. Now that's all deliberate. And you better start asking why it's deliberate. Because sensibility would tell you to stop it all, wouldn't you? What right do you say, okay, if say 100, 200 folk get killed over the next year or so in a country, because there's people coming in who are very unhappy with you. Who gives you the right to say those folks should just die? They're just like you and everybody else. And yet the argument will be, well, they're just like the folk that your folks have killed over there, your armies have killed over. This is how they play the game, you see. But the fact is that none of the public ever get a chance to say who you want to go to war with, or if you want to go to war with anybody at all. Because you don't have democracy. You don't have it. I was looking at different articles tonight, trying to find something to talk about, because there's bundles and bundles and bundles and lots of megabytes of rubbish out there. That's all it is rubbish. Heaps of rubbish. Data. You never remember in the next year or so. It's all irrelevant rubbish. Yeah, you've got the fact that Trump has caved in again, supposedly, on the climate change thing. But in reality, it's all the different agencies that already get money that pretend they're the real authorities on climate, that issued their on cue what they're going to do by law since, I think it was Bush Jr., it was in the 90s anyway. When they created that, they must churn out these reports every year. So they're putting it out there and they're blaming Trump for caving in, but we don't know yet what's going on. They're going to go ahead regardless if Trump's there or not, obviously. Although Trump has, as far as I can see, and everybody else can see, is backtracked and everything else he said he'd do too. And again, too, you're still waiting to see if Trump is just the con man who was the front man to get another job done in the Middle East on behalf of the neocons who published their list before. That's the world we live in, isn't it? It's all deceptions. All deceptions. But the people who really rule the world and own it all, who really have fixed it that this terrorism must be across the whole planet eventually in all so-called civilized countries or first world countries, by design, because they're going to make it all happen. And then they tell you that for your whole life long you're going to have terrorism. Why? Why? Well, we know why. That this is the agenda. To change our entire way of living. And at the same time, too, massive police forces, all kinds of police forces, including viral police forces, that are going to come down on you as they change all of society. Oh, you can't live like that anymore. You can't drive around in that thing there. You got to get one of these electric cars. And you'll say, well, I can't afford that. So don't worry, the taxpayer will fund a good part of it. That's your good capitalism for you. And because capitalism, that's what it is slightly different from the fascist system, where in the fascist system, the government would really be in charge over the corporations and over the people who over the labor as well, to make things work. And capitalism, as I say, they just rubber stamp on behalf of the big corporations. And meanwhile, they make sure that they keep brainwashing the people down below that you live in a democracy. And everybody above you is a public servant. But anyway, we're in the system where we have to change our entire way of living to suit the masters. You get put into austerity. You can't drive that vehicle. If you can't afford the electric car, then you get off the road. You say, well, I can't live there if I got. Well, you better move into a city then. I've gone through all these talks before because I'm not making it up. This is from all the different people involved in creating the Agenda 21. There's stacks and stacks of think tanks out there who worked in it all, who are quite open about it. And it's amazing too, isn't it, where you have all the documentation from the sources with the approval of government and all the rest of it, and you show it to people, and that's your big shock. For a lot of people, when they first come into a movement, they say, oh, I've got all this data and truth on all the real, and they go to a show, and people don't want to know. And that really shocks them, doesn't it? They don't want to know. Isn't that amazing, eh? And again, I've even read that the reports from the people who control your minds, because they're always testing you. MIT is fantastic, but lots of institutes out there are doing it all the time. The Tavistock, of course, was the premier one for all of that for a long time. Still going yet, too. And every country's got its think tanks. And they use the universities, too, to constantly test subjects and give them little peeks into the internet to give them access to all the tweets and so on, extra, so they can do their memes and their themes and all the rest of it, and find out if the things are actually working. They even put out fake history, by the way. I read the article a few years ago from MIT, and there was a professor there who had been given permission to put out fake history. He and his team in the class were working on it to see, and then they would check the internet to see how many people were picking up on it and running with it, thinking it was all true. You have no idea what reality is, do you? You really don't. Now, the reason that people will say, I don't care who says what, and I don't want to believe. And I've heard them say, I choose not to believe it. I choose. And that is what they're doing. Because it's so scary to them. It's very, very scary, isn't it? That they might not be able to cope, knowing that the safety nets and everything else out there that they believed in really wasn't there to help them at all. It's too terrifying for them. I understand that too. I understand. That's why you don't push it on them. You don't just get angry and push it on them. A lot of folk could not handle it. You're dealing with people, remember, who from the day they're born have been brainwashed. And the brainwashing is constantly updated and added to and reinforced and augmented. So it's not their fault. It's not their fault at all. And don't forget, that could be you. There's an old song, is there but for fortune go you or I. How true it is too. But you have to, as I say, look after yourself too. If you understand things and you have a mind which, it's more than a mind, as questioning, that there's something drives you. It drives you. And it can pick you up and carry to the highest. I actually use this analogy that it's like going up a mountain. And your brain is racing, and it's understanding all this data that's coming along, and sometimes you go into the valley and you have to digest it then, and sometimes you're picked up again, taken back up again, woof, another rush, and there's so much. There's an excitement to knowing, incredible excitement, because a lot of people will say this too. It's the first time in their life they started to live. You're living. Amongst all the racketeering, all the chronology, and everything else out there. And I mean everything out there, including what you used to think of as, I say, it was your patriot movement. Carefully taken over quietly, eh? Oh, very cleverly too. But the US at one time it really was a bit of a beacon. It wasn't perfect at all, and yet it was corrupt. Sure, it was corrupt by those who took it over. But the fact is, the idea of why it was there and the rights of the people was something that made people drool across the world that didn't have these rights. And the whole idea too that everybody had these rights and everybody, even what to do with law, had to be proven guilty, etc. before. But you knew too that was taken over a long time ago, and you got to have big bucks and a good lawyer to get off with anything. And if you have that, you can get off with anything. It became the same as the British system. That's what happened. But now we have a world with the standard techniques known. In fact, the professors and so on go across the world working for different countries, teaching these techniques and the latest techniques and brainwashing their people and their public and all the rest of it. Until your news today is just it's a racket of loud nonsense. If you notice too, whether it's the women or the guys, the women too are more noticeable. They yell when they're announcing the news. Like, it all sounds exactly the same. But the idea now is since they're not going to give you any real news that matters to you. I mean, someone's affairs or whatever is not news as far as I'm concerned. And what happens in Hollywood is not news to me. You know? But what they give you is little bits of nothingness dressed up as news. It's like a news. And it's always presented with hype. See, hype works the same way as a horror movie works on you. In a horror movie, all the bang, 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 your life is at stake. You run through that forest, you see. You're identifying the characters. They know this. It's like they've got papers out and this stuff, stacks them. And if you turn away or say, oh, that's enough, it's a rotten movie, which a lot of them are pretty rotten, but you'll still watch it. Because if you look away, you might be the person getting eaten with that big thing that's chasing you through the forest. Very simple technique, isn't it? Your primal instincts jump in, fight or flight. Yeah? Well, the same techniques are used with news. I'm going to turn this off, this jangling thing on my nerves here, this noise they call news. Bam, 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 bam. Then they flash off to some sports guy, and then they flash back to somebody in Hollywood, and then they flash into you. And it's all hype until your nerves are jangling. But you see, if I turn this off, I might miss something that's going to be vital, like food rationing coming or something. Get your ticket today, you know what I mean? Something like that. That's how it's presented to you, isn't it? They dress up rubbish like a news, and then give it to you and say that this is news. It's nonsense. Take away all the hype and see what have you got here. Nothing. This is intentional. This is a technique that's used now. Across the board, every day. All at the same time, from across all media. Which tells you an awful lot right there. Are they really all different independent media? Really something. But anything that really matters to you? Oh, nothing at all. Nothing at all. And the political correctness in them too is getting sickening. It's just awful. Terrible, terrible. Because now you're into the next phase of managing your minds as they manage you out of your homes, if you're in the rural areas, and into the cities and so on, and off the roads and out of the car. Big agenda. They've been talking about it for the last 50 years doing this. Here it is. And there's always different excuses to do it to you. But I've never ever seen the big boys publish anything in my lifetime that they didn't accomplish. No matter if they have little setbacks, a little bit here and there, they'll come back with it, and however many years it takes them, they get it done. You know. You see, too, they've got the royalty out there. Is it Prince William or something? Yeah, Prince William. And there he is telling, there's too many of you. Yeah, you know, humans, you humans, yeah. There's too many of you. And he's on his third child. It reminds me of a book I've got from 1920s, when the same crew in England were telling the general public, right after World War I, where they lost probably close to 1 million people, probably millions, I don't know. They'll never tell you the whole. I was even looking, trying to get the whole number of folk who were killed in World War I from Britain, and they can't find a real number for it. They can't tell you the real truth on it. Except you'll find it right across the length in the north, south, east, west of Britain, these cenotaphs with all the names and different people in them, from even little villages and so on. And 1920, 2 years after that war ended, they're telling you, there's too many people. After World War II, same thing, the Royal Commission was held for King George and a whole bit, too many people. Didn't kill enough, that's what they said. The war didn't kill enough of them. And then you have Prince William warns there are too many humans, eh? And his third child, he's taking over from Philip, the Queen's Abbey, and he is supposedly into some kind of semi-retirement, and he was the head of all these depopulation agendas under using environmentalism, because they own they're the head of all the organizations to do environment. And even the Royal Institute for International Affairs, which is a big private organizations for the CFR, they're the head of that too. It's a royal charter to create them, which means royalties at the head of them. So now he's taking over. He's got a function now. His function is to tell you there's too many of you, and you're eating too much, and you're eating too well, and blah 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 blah. And he's going to help you get used to the idea that you should start dying off, for goodness sake, and stop having children. Why don't you get sterilized? And where are you in the totem pole anyway? Etc. etc. That's how it goes, isn't it? I'm going to put up some links tonight too, just to, not really to go along with so much of what I'm saying tonight, but there's nothing much out there. Anything that I want to put out there, I have to do actually a little bit of work on investigating to get some good stuff. And I have some good stuff, but if I could ever get allowed to put it all out, we'll wait and see, right? Because the authorities now are becoming pretty awful. And you're seeing it. You're seeing it. You first comes intimidation and then threats and all the rest of it too on the general population as they bring you into this new system. And they'll keep calling it democratic, just like the Soviet Union was democratic because you're allowed to vote these leaders in from the same party. And they had their rule by councils because they appointed the councils for different aspects of society. And they appointed the leaders of these NGOs, supposedly. Nothing's changed. It's the same system as we have too today. But yeah, we're living through a big agenda, and now they want to rush it ahead. This is the century for change, when it was all to be implemented step by step. And there's a lot of steps to getting implemented. Getting you off the road, getting you into these habitat areas, as I want to call them, stopping you breeding, and also eradicating any domestic cultures that you had too. That's a big, big part of it. I was reading, for an instance too, that a school in New York, I think it was, where the teacher just told them, the people, I think it was mainly Hispanics that were in the class, it just said, speak English in the class, and they all walked out. Which tells you that they don't have any regard for the country that's helping them out. I mean, there you go. One little example. But again, that is the agenda, because Jacques Attali, in his book, Winners and Losers in the New World Order, and he said that the US was by the big agenda, and he was part of the United Nations and so on. He was up there. The agenda was to be Spanish-speaking eventually. That's the agenda for the US. So there you go. I'll put up too the climate science special report by the groups that are paid by your tax money to con you. And they're all on the tape, by the way, because they'll get paid to do this. And a lot of them who work in these agencies also have investments in the geoengineering projects that are underway. It's not speculation, by the way. Some of it's been reported in even the mainstream itself. We live in a make-believe world, don't we? Where you're made to believe something, or else you're an outcast. You're made to believe it. Oh, don't you believe in something? What's wrong with you? And you can see the mental illness across the board too, with all different groups ready to clash and fight each other, etc. It's very interesting to me just studying it all, because it's following the guidelines set out a long, long, long time ago of releasing the nihilists. They called them the nihilists and the atheists, and what they meant to was the anarchists, all at the same time. That's what you're seeing today, isn't it? All the young groups being radicalized in school, university, and now the internet's done a great job too for radicalization, and they're ready to go and fight and kill. They probably couldn't even verbalize, really, in an argument that lasted more than 2 minutes, why they have to change everything. They couldn't even tell you. These are the ones that are always used initially to get all started. And then the dominant group they think they're working for eventually annihilates them. That always happens. It's fascinating to see this repetition, isn't it? And we're living through it. We're living through it. Quite amazing. I was going to mention too, article about the International Monetary Fund and all the rest of it from CG, which is really a CFR group in Canada. They're a Centre for Innovation and Global Governance, working with the United Nations and the whole global agenda, and with a university too behind them in Canada. And their stuff is incredibly, it is CFR, but it's incredibly arrogant. They have a little article there about Trump and how he's behaving like a little, when it comes to the World Bank, and they're not playing ball with them with the globalistic things and the climate change, and it's like a little child. This is what they say. But the arrogance from this non-elected group that are working with the government, and the government doesn't even want to tell you they're working with them, even though they helped set them up with our tax money. It's amazing to see how you really are run. It's astonishing to me. Astonishing. But that's what you got, an arrogant group who know darn well that they're running a lot of what happens in Canada and the States and elsewhere. Very arrogant. None of them are elected. But when you hear statements like that coming from them, the arrogance, you better start being a bit wary here, because that kind of arrogance doesn't just stop there. And this one, I'm sure, is way beyond their statement there, and they have no intention for stopping. It truly is astonishing, isn't it? How we're trained to be distracted, naive, or just run after sex. Just run, sex. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. And there's never been such a time to ogle things on the internet by design, all deliberate. Revolution always uses massive sex. And they always push it to all those who are into it, who will be the shock troops for a revolution, to this. It's their right to have any kind of sex, and as much of it as possible. The fallout from it is never equated. The French Revolution used it all too. And even before that, actually, you had the Protestant Revolution. For those who didn't know it, there was a revolution. in Germany. And Martin Luther and a few other people too, they raided the convents and kidnapped nuns and raped them. Luther eventually married one or two of them, you know. And that's a fact as well. And there's more to the whole movement than meets the eye. With the French Revolution, during it, and by the way too, they also slaughtered, just like they did in Spain as well, with the same movement, by the way. And Spain was later, of course, in the 20th century. But it was the same thing. They got the nuns and they put them in barges and so on, and the priests, and sunk them in the lakes and rivers and so on, and in the sea. But they had such a fallout with orphans and street urchins, as I like to call them, all over the place, because no one was taking care of the natural outcome of all this free sex, as they called it. No one. And then when they become a nuisance, because they're all begging all over the place, the governments always send out sweeping squads at night. There are certain places in Latin America that still goes on today. Not making it up, you can check into it. Look into the orphans of this country and that country and so on. In the main cities, and you go back far enough, if they haven't scrubbed it off the internet by now, but you can find it. I've still got the hard copies from papers from years ago. That's what happens. But they always tell you you're free when they don't want to talk about the fallout from it all. And of course, that's what they push for in the so-called civilized countries or highly developed countries, is that everybody must be responsible. Then you pay the welfare, etc., for aborting them before they're born. And then you have orphanages too, paid for by the state, for the ones who manage to survive. You know. And they call it civilized. There's a consequence to everything. Everything. Nothing is free. Nothing. Zilch. And yes, there certainly are societies and agencies involved down through time and the revolution game. Absolutely. Same organization, actually. The same MO. When you see the same MO and the same things getting spouted, the same techniques getting used, it's the same organization. Remember, too, just like any foundation, like Carl Quigley and others have said, they can set a mandate to accomplish it. So one think tank or foundation can set itself up with one mandate that we must accomplish this. And this could take 200 years. And they hire and retire for 200 years, but they eventually get it all done. Long-term agenda, long-term planning, long-term work. That's how the whole system has worked, including these so-called revolutions and the stages of the world too, from industrial, post-industrial, free trade, etc., service economy, and then down into basically a pauper state, because you're going to get, as Russell said, you're going to get tokens eventually from the government. That's what this whole paying everybody a basic wage whether they're working or not is about. And then when you're bad and naughty, they'll withhold your tokens, which you cannot save up, by the way. It starts at the same sum every week or every 2 weeks. And what you haven't spent just disappears. Then you can't be better than the person next to you at that level. Different levels, of course. You'll be punished by withholding if you've been very naughty, just like they're punishing you on your what's called social media. Oh, you can't say that you were naughty and bad. You're not going to be on for 2 or 3 months now. See, it's all working. Train them like animals, and that's what it's about. From myself, Alan Watt from Ontario, Canada, where I had snow last night. It's good night to me. Your God or your gods go with you.
I have put myself in the role of waking up the sheeple. And unfortunately, it means that I've got to do some things and say some things that makes me, in the long run, the bad guy. And I know a lot of you don't like it, and you don't like me for that very reason. But I'm going to continue to do it simply because there's nobody else out there who will do it. And it must be done. We can't regain our freedom. We can't restore the Republic. We can't put the Constitution back in its rightful, legal and lawful place as the supreme law of the land if we're running around bumping into trees, bumping into each other, scared of every little shadow, passing rumors back and forth, jumping up and down every time you hear some little tale from somebody. We have to pay attention to the real enemy, to the real task that lies before us. We cannot, under any circumstances, be goaded into any kind of stupidity, or stupid confrontation, or answering some alert sent out by somebody in some place somewhere because some of their people got themselves in trouble. When my family and I were gassed down in Phoenix, I didn't call up the militia. I called for some militia members to come down and witness what was happening so that I could survive the court battle. I didn't send out militia alerts across the country, nor did anyone else in my behalf. And I handled my own legal problem myself, in my own way, with my own money. I did not beg you for legal defense funds. I kept my eye on the sparrow, ladies and gentlemen, and that's exactly where you'd better put yours. A militia, by definition, is to protect the nation and the state. If you are a state militia, your first obligation is to your state constitution and to your state, to your communities, to your counties. The militia of Michigan has no obligation to the militia of Arizona unless the nation finds itself in war to fight a battle to protect the Constitution and the Bill of Rights of the United States of America. You all need to understand these things because you don't seem to understand much at all. Until that happens, you have no obligation anywhere but in your local community, in your state, to your state constitution. If and when another Waco occurs, or someone attempts another Waco, then we must all come together to stop it. But until then, we don't march because Joe Blow, having nothing to do with the militia whatsoever, goes with some friends and gets himself arrested for whatever reason. You don't do that. And you don't run around like chickens with your head cut off because there's a rumor that somebody's going to come after you this weekend. You don't do that. The militia, by definition, must be ready to respond at any time to any emergency. You don't go home and watch television and wait for the next rumor and then run around scared that something's going to happen. You must be prepared all the time, every moment, every day, every week, every month, every year, if you are a member of the militia, to respond if you are called upon. You must always protect your leadership. If all of you out there really believe that something's going to happen this weekend, there's a very easy way to make sure that nothing does happen. It's very simple. Go somewhere else. when they come for you where they think you're going to be, just don't be there. And you don't discuss your weaknesses and your fears or your strengths on radio. Every time someone attempts that on this broadcast, you see me cut them off. And so you flock to all the other radio stations so that you can talk about how scared you are and how weak your militia is, or how strong your militia is, or what your plans are. And you are stupid. Stupid. Keep it up. You will ensure that if there ever is a confrontation, you will be defeated soundly very quickly. Not because the enemy is strong, not because the enemy is smart, not because the enemy is any better, but simply because you're stupid and you're acting stupid. Recently, in the militia of Michigan, one of the best, strongest militias in this country, there was a meeting where some contingency plans were discussed, and whether or not what was said was planned, I have no idea. But a militia officer went out and began talking about it. He should have gone to his commanding officers, and there should have been a hearing called, an investigation by the command staff, and it should have been dealt with quietly within the command staff and not on radio all over the nation as it was. Everyone concerned should be busted from their rank, and new leadership should be installed. If the militia is going to be successful, the militia had better learn discipline. You had better learn that you do not ever make a public statement on behalf of the militia or about the militia without the consent and permission of the highest commanding officer in the militia. No public statements should ever be made except by a public relations officer who specializes in public relations and communicates every release and gets permission for every release from the commanding officer of the militia. You people are headed for a fall, most of you. I keep getting calls, can I be a member of the Second Continental Army of the Republic? No, you cannot. Membership is by invitation only, except in the Intelligence Corps, which I am the director of, and I determine who can be a member and who cannot be, and under what terms, and what job they do. You don't hear all this stuff from the Second Continental Army of the Republic. You don't hear rumors about the Second Continental Army of the Republic. You don't hear people on the radio speaking for the Second Continental Army of the Republic. You don't hear leaks from the Second Continental Army of the Republic. And you never will. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I suggest that those of you who are not guilty of any of this, get with those who are and teach them how to grow up. Teach them to take off their diapers and put on a pair of pants. Teach them to function as adults and not children. We're not playing cowboys and Indians here. And sooner or later, all this stupidity is going to cause people to lose their lives. Whoever fires the first shot loses the war. And there are many people out there trying to instigate you into doing exactly that. When the militia of Montana called for all of the militias of all of the states to march to New Mexico because Catron County was overrun with the National Guard and the FBI and the BATF, and the citizens were being rounded up and put in a concentration camp, if you had done it, it would have been all over, and every patriot in this country would now be in jail. You'd better understand it. You'd better start thinking straight. It is imperative for the future of not only your state but the nation, for the future of liberty, that you learn to be responsible. When I went to speak in Michigan, here it was, a Constitution Party rally, and all these guys kept showing up in camouflage fatigues, even to the little garrison cap, and field jackets, and jack boots. It wasn't a militia meeting. These guys were playing games. They were feeding their egos. It made them feel good. Those are the wrong people to have in the militia. You see, if dressing up like a soldier makes you feel really big, and if it puffs up your ego, you shouldn't be there. If carrying a gun makes you feel bigger or more important, then you should never be allowed to carry a gun, in my estimation. But since I believe in the second article and amendment, I would be the last to stop you. But I happen to know something about human nature. A lot of you are playing games out there. You're feeding your egos. You're substituting for your sexual inadequacies and your lack of personality or character or whatever it is. You're trying to make up for your sense of insecurity. And that's not going to get it. We need strong, self-reliant, confident men and women in the militias. Men and women who will answer the call when it is necessary, who will train and be prepared and be ready, who will keep their mouths shut. Militias who will not get on the radio and talk about their inner squabbles or whatever is happening. And you must hold your people accountable. And if they will not act responsible, and if they will not maintain discipline, you must bust them in rank as a warning. If that doesn't work, you must oust them from your military unit. And it's not paramilitary. Get rid of that word. The militia is military. You must oust them. Militia members should never wear any kind of a uniform unless they are participating in a training activity which requires it. If you're going to be on television and meet the press, you should wear a suit and tie. You should know the law. You should know the history of the militia. You should talk about those things and not how many Soviet tanks are in the United States, which makes you look like a blooming idiot, even though we know there are. And if you're the leader of a militia, don't take somebody else to speak for you. If you can't speak, don't go. If you can't speak, you got no business leading. And cut out all this religious crap. The militia is a military organization, not a church. Good night, my children, and God bless you all.
You're listening to The Hour of the Time. I'm Pooh.
And I'm William Cooper.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, my dear.
You're welcome.
It's been a while since you did the pledge for us.
Yeah?
But you haven't really been up to par lately, have you?
Mm-mm.
Feeling better tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. See you later.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. Don't go away, folks. Got some things to talk about. I remember my first love affair. Somehow or another, the whole darn thing went wrong. A lot of trouble in your life. You better hold on, but you live strong. Take issue with me when I level with you and tell you the true state of affairs without pulling any punches. Because I don't think you can survive unless you know the truth. I don't think you can even wake up unless you know the truth. I don't believe that I can accomplish anything by sitting here and stroking your egos and telling you how beautiful and wonderful you are and how we've got lots of time, and if we just, work with politicians and things like that, everything is going to be fine. I can't do that. I can tell you that if we do all of those things, we will be responsible people, exhausting every lawful and constitutional and proper and responsible method to try to restore the republic. Nobody needs to restore the public. The public is always the blithering sheeple public. But to restore the republic and to maintain freedom, which in my estimation is the ultimate achievement of all human experience. Because in the entire history of the world, man has always been owned by somebody, even kings. You say, well, who could possibly own a king? No king was ever set upon a throne except by the power of the priesthood. Whatever that may have happened to be at whatever time in history that king was put upon that throne. And nothing has changed today. See, Bill Clinton wouldn't be sitting on the throne of this country unless the priesthood, the power of that be behind the throne, put him there and tell him what to do. He's carrying out an agenda, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not his agenda. He's not smart enough, in case you haven't discovered that. So, I lay it on the line. I tell you the truth, whatever the truth happens to be, knowing that if you know the truth, you can prepare yourselves to deal with that truth and deal with reality, and you won't be destroyed when you discover that it really is the truth. You see, what if I stroked you along here and lied to you and tell you how wonderful you are, that you're sitting on your couch doing nothing? Most of you. Some of you are not doing that. Some of you are very active. What if I were to tell you that everything can be solved with no problem just by writing letters to your congressman and making some calls and sending some faxes, which you should be doing, just to be responsible? And what if I told you that there was no threat or any danger from the federal government whatsoever, that this just, we're just going through some rough times and some people are just politically misguided and there's some corruption in Washington. There is no big conspiracy, and by exercising the power of the vote and being active in our community politics, we can turn everything around. Would I be doing you a favor? Well, I think some of you probably wish that if I did that, I would be doing you a favor, and you probably wish that that was the case. But the truth is no, I would not be doing you a favor. I would be doing you a great injustice. I would be wasting my time, ladies and gentlemen. And we would most probably achieve only another kind of sleep. But nevertheless, sleep is sleep. Okay? And I don't want to do that to you. I want to awaken you. And to be fully awakened means that you have to be confronted with a situation that is so horrible, so reprehensible, so against everything that we have ever been taught in our lives, that it may shock you into some kind of a lethargic state of depression for a while until you learn how to deal with it, however each individual does that. But most people do. And when they do, they get angry, and then they want to do something to rectify it. And when they get busy, they come out of that depression, and then they learn how to really live. Because in your daily life, if you're not dealing with truth and reality, if you're not stepping out in front of the crowd, taking a risk, I like to call it walking on the edge of the razor blade. If you're not walking on the edge of that razor blade, folks, you're not really alive. You're not living. Chances are there's no purpose in your life. There's no direction. And I know that many of you feel that way. Many of you went through school, reared by your family, who are probably working blue-collar or white-collar Americans, searching out in their own way for the realization of the American dream, and they may or may not have achieved it. It doesn't matter. What matters is all your life you were told that you weren't smart enough to own the company. You had to prepare yourself to work for somebody else. Isn't that correct? And you were taught wrong. You weren't taught how to invest your money. You weren't taught how to come up, to bring yourself up from whatever position you found yourself in when you were reared by your parents, who chances are achieved a better life than their parents. And they weren't really taught how to do it either. They just did it. But so many people, you see, buy into that kind of a concept. They really think that they're worthless. I mean, let's get real here. Nobody really thinks that they're worthless, but they have a very low self-esteem. They can't imagine themselves climbing any higher than where they're at most of the time. Although they'd like to, they just don't. There are so many people who are stuck in jobs, ladies and gentlemen. They've been in those jobs all their lives. Filing. File clerks. Filing papers in filing cabinets for somebody else their whole life. Do you really believe that they enjoy that kind of work? I don't think so. There may be some few of them who do, but I can't imagine it. And the pay, ladies and gentlemen, is not very good. And I could go through any number of hundreds of different kinds of jobs, and the description would be the same. Why do people stay in jobs like that? Because somehow they've been convinced by the system and by life and by their parents and by school and by school teachers and by bosses and supervisors in their own mind that they're not any better than that they can't be any better than that. To hope to be any better than that is to ask for disappointment. And it's just not true. It isn't true. Never was true. You see, because the man who heads the company has the same brain that the person who sweeps the floors has. He's just learned how to use it. Now, learning how to use your brain doesn't mean that you have to go to college, or that you have to read 5,000 books, or that you have to have an IQ of 180. No. Throughout history, there have been men and women with an IQ of 80, which is supposed to be not very good, who have achieved greatness in their lives, who have achieved a pretty good modicum of wealth, who have done great things, who have invented, all because they believed that they could and they didn't listen to anyone else. They did their best and they learned how to use their brain. An IQ, ladies and gentlemen, is a measurement, really, of how you have learned to use your brain by thinking, and an awful lot of it has to do with common sense. Common sense? What is common sense? Common sense is when you touch a stove and it's hot and the coil is glowing red and you burn your finger. Common sense is when you make the connection in your brain that when you touch that stove and that coil was hot because the stove was turned on, you're going to get burned and it really hurts and you better not ever do it again. So the next time you walk in the kitchen and you see that the stove is on, you don't touch the coils. Now, another jump above that shows even better intelligence is that you never ever touch the coils at all unless you have to perform maintenance on the stove. And you don't just look at the dial and make sure the dial is turned off. You unplug the stove. And then you let the stove sit for a while to make sure that the coil is cool before you touch it. That's IQ. That's IQ, ladies and gentlemen. It's also common sense. IQ is the ability on a low level to say 2 and 2 is 4. On a little higher level, it's the ability to say 2 times 2 is 4. On a little higher level than that, it's the ability to say the square root of 4 is 2. And a part of it is education. Another part of it is the ability to think. And anyone can do it. It may be a little more difficult for some than others because, ladies and gentlemen, for the most part, scientific study has proven that your ability to think and feel good about yourself and use and exercise common sense is developed before the age of 5 years old. Now I say 5 because I want to cover the bases, because there's studies that say before the age of 3, there's studies that say before the age of 4, there's studies that say before the age of 5. But all authorities agree that this is developed before the age of 5. So if you had problems in your life before the age of 5 years old, and you didn't have adults who would help you, or you were deprived or locked in some room somewhere, for long periods of time, or you suffered childhood illness for several years, it may be more difficult for you to do these things, ladies and gentlemen, but the fact remains you can do them. The human ability to confront the truth, realize that it's the truth, and go into the survival mode and learn to deal with that truth and overcome it if necessary and prevail is astounding. But the fact remains that human beings must know what that truth is before they can go into the mode that lets them overcome it. And there is a tendency, a great tendency, for most people to ignore the truth unless they are backed in the corner and the truth becomes threatening to them personally. Most people have the tendency to say, oh yes, I know that that's going on, but it's not going to happen to me. And whoever it happens to must deserve it. Remember that fellow, 3 days ago, they raided his home in the middle of the night, and they took out all those guns and they spread them on the grass, and they said that he was a terrorist, and they took him away. And then in the newspaper, it talked about the fact that he was a member of a militia, and they were going to lock this guy up forever because he was going to blow up the Empire State Building. I always knew there was something funny about him. He was always talking about the Constitution things. Nobody ever talks about those things. But it'll never happen to me. You recognize anybody there? Maybe yourself. Maybe your neighbor. You see, they have the public so brainwashed, ladies and gentlemen, that you can have an exemplary citizen. A neighbor whose home you have visited many, many times. You have seen the kinds of guns he has, a shotgun, a deer rifle, a pistol, maybe a .22 rifle that he's had ever since he was a child. He may have brought an AK-47 back from Vietnam, or he may have purchased one simply because in Vietnam he learned that that's one of the best weapons ever made in the history of the world. And he may have it there for self-defense, or he may just have it as a bit of nostalgia. Who knows? Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's perfectly legal and lawful. And the right is protected by the Constitution for the United States of America. You know that thing he talks about sometimes that you've never read? And all of a sudden he becomes a political threat to the status quo. And in the middle of the night they raid his home. They spread these weapons out on his grass. They have a picture of these weapons in the newspaper the next day. On the 6 o'clock news, the anchor talks about Joe's house was raided, and it was found that Joe had been planning to blow up the Empire State Building, and he had automatic weapons. Now, you're sitting there, you know this is a lie, but you don't say a word, do you? No, you don't. Nobody has, and nobody will, and even if you did, nobody would report it on the news or in the newspapers. How do I know all this, ladies and gentlemen? Because it's happening all across the country. All across this country it's happening. It happened in Waco, Texas, where they said that they went to serve a warrant on David Koresh because he had automatic weapons. And they wanted 2 people, David Koresh, and I forget who the other person was. The truth is they had no automatic weapons whatsoever. Period. None. Zero. Zip. Zilch. And even if they had, ladies and gentlemen, it would have only required at that time a $200 tax to make it a legal ownership. You don't kill people for that. You don't drive up in front of their homes with cattle cars full of armed, flak-jacketed, teenage, ninja jackbooted Nazi thugs. You don't do that. No, you go and knock on the door and say, we understand you have an automatic weapon here that you haven't paid a tax on. If you don't pay the tax on that automatic weapon, you're in violation of the law, and we're going to have to prosecute you. Would you like to pay that tax? It's only $200. Do you know anybody in the world confronted with that would not pay the $200 and make it legal? And why wasn't that done, ladies and gentlemen? Why were those people murdered? They say they were only interested in the children. No, they weren't. They didn't care about the children. They murdered those children. Murdered them. They took tanks in there, ladies and gentlemen, armored personnel carriers, helicopter gunships that fired down through the roof and murdered people. They had snipers all around the place, killing people. For a $200 tax? That's what they claimed. When the American public wouldn't buy that, what did they say next? Well, they said David Koresh was promiscuously sleeping around with all the women in the building. What do you want to bet? Most of those agents are sleeping around with somebody somewhere. You really think they cared about that? What do you want to bet that a good portion of the people in Waco, Texas were sleeping all around the town with people and were promiscuous? What do you think about that? And have you heard the stories about Janet Reno and her sex life in Florida with other women? You really think she cared if David Koresh was sleeping around with those women? Not on your life. And then all of a sudden they made allegations that they were there because the children were being abused. Well, if they were, it's not a federal offense, and the federal government has no business sticking their nose in it. It would have been a matter for the local authorities, wouldn't it? But you see, those same allegations had been made before by the same people who instigated this raid. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? The local authorities had investigated the Branch Davidians and their children, found that those children were the most well-adjusted, happiest, brightest group of any group of children that they had ever investigated, and that there was absolutely no substantiation for the allegations of child abuse whatsoever. Twice they had investigated, and twice they drew those conclusions. So what was that all about? Well, to this day, I don't really know. Except for one thing, that it was absolutely 100%, with no doubt whatsoever, about the destruction of the Constitution for the United States of America and the Bill of Rights. Can't happen in America, you say? How about Randy Weaver and his wife, Vicki, and his 3 children? Four children, actually. And his friend, Kevin. The BATF wanted to entrap someone so they could force that person to become a spy for them in the community that Randy Weaver sort of belonged to. You see, he was a separatist. He never harmed anyone. He didn't want to harm anyone. He didn't hurt anybody by that belief. And in America, you're entitled to believe whatever you want, aren't you? Is that true, or is that just a bunch of bullshit? Because they sent a BATF provocateur to sell Randy Weaver a sawed-off shotgun that was 1/4 of an inch shorter than the legal limit. 1/4 of an inch. He purchased it, and then later they sent another agent to buy it from him. He sold it. All the time, he never measured the barrel. He was told that it was legal. He thought it was legal. And then they arrested him and charged him with possessing a sawed-off shotgun below the legal limit. And they were going to put him away forever. They told him that. Said, Randy, we'll let you off of this if you'll agree to become an informant for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. He said, no, I will not do that. They said, in that case, we're going to lock you away forever. And Randy knew he'd been had, so he took his wife and his children, moved up to Idaho, up on a mountain, and stayed there. Well, they eventually found him. Went out there. The dogs sensed the marshals were there. They didn't announce themselves. They were hiding in the bushes. Randy and his son and Kevin thought that there were deer on the property and grabbed their rifles and ran out to put some meat on the table. Well, the son ran into the marshals. They jumped up and killed his dog right in front of him, shot the dog. Didn't announce who they were. Didn't say anything. The boy, thinking he was going to be killed, fired back. Kevin fired. Then they ran for the cabin, and the boy was shot in the back, ladies and gentlemen, murdered. One of the marshals was hit by his own people, not by Randy Weaver or either one of the two boys. He was shot and killed by his own people, another marshal. Later, during the siege of this family, by over 500 federal law enforcement personnel, FBI, BATF, military. Yeah, they had armored personnel carriers and helicopters up there too, ladies and gentlemen, for this little family. A scum-sucking, Nazi jackbooted thug dog named Lon Horiuchi, an FBI sniper, shot and killed Vicki Weaver as she stood in the door holding her 8-month-old baby to her breast. She had no weapon, was guilty of no crime, had committed no crime whatsoever. Murdered her. Shot Randy Weaver, shot Kevin. His son was dead. After it was all over, ladies and gentlemen, guess what? Randy Weaver was cleared of all charges. All charges. Found guilty of nothing. And released. His wife is dead. His son is dead. He had been wounded. Kevin had been wounded. They had been up there in that cabin, bleeding, with his dead wife and son, while he was surrounded by the most terrible, vicious, ruthless might
of the government machine that you can imagine. And at one point, a helicopter was trying to lift a rubber bladder full of fuel to drop on his cabin to incinerate them, just as they did at Waco, to destroy all the evidence and burn them to death. What was that all about? And then in Georgia, a BATF provocateur, agent, informant, went to the Georgia militia and began talking about making pipe bombs. And urging everybody to make pipe bombs. But everybody refused. Except for the informants. They went out and bought all the materials and bought the pipes and bought all this stuff. Brought it back. When nobody would help them make pipe bombs, they took it out in the dead of night and buried it on militia members' property without their permission or knowledge. And then they went to a judge and said that they knew that this material was there and that the militia was going to make bombs, and they obtained search warrants and went directly to the spot where it was buried because they put it there, dug it up, and all this has come out in testimony in court, ladies and gentlemen. That was in Georgia. And the press made a big to-do about it and said that they were planning to blow up the Olympic Games. Remember that? And then, just as I predicted, during the Olympic Games, they found a pipe bomb that went off shortly after it was found. Isn't that amazing? And tried to blame it on a security guard named Jewel, who had nothing to do with it. Phoenix, Arizona, all of a sudden, there's a Viper militia that nobody in Arizona ever heard of, nobody connected with any militia, that is, that was making bombs and training to blow up all the federal buildings in Phoenix, Arizona. And they found fertilizer in their garages. Amongst all the militia members, they found about 300 pounds of fertilizer, which is 6 bags of ammonium nitrate, in all of their combined garages. Ammonium nitrate is a grass fertilizer, ladies and gentlemen. In the poor soil in the desert of Phoenix, you need a lot of it to make grass grow and turn green and look beautiful. Found no bombs, yet the press went crazy, claimed that these people were planning to blow up all the federal buildings in Phoenix, Arizona, that they were making bombs, had made bombs, had bomb materials, and the press recorded that they had over 70 automatic weapons. Another lie. They didn't have any automatic weapons. None at all. No bombs, no bomb-making materials, no nothing. They had never planned to blow up any buildings in Phoenix, much less federal buildings. The prosecutors in Phoenix, Arizona have egg on their face. Janet Napolitano, the local witch queen, who refuses to prosecute child pornographers who are caught red-handed because I guess she loves child pornography. I can think of no other reason why she won't enforce that law, but yet she goes after a group of people that she calls the Viper militia and makes up laws as she goes along, makes up evidence, falsifies reports to the press, and then is extremely embarrassed when the judge lets most of them go and says that there is no substantiation for most of the charges. You see, it was all a lie. But do you think that the press reports the fact that it turns out to be a lie? No, they don't. Do you think the 6 o'clock news is going to tell anybody that across the country? No, they don't. Do you think it's going to be printed in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, the San Francisco Chronicle? No, it's not. So what does the American people remember? They remember there was a Georgia militia that was going to blow up the Olympics, and later a pipe bomb blew up. It must have been them. And they remember that there was a Viper militia in Phoenix, Arizona that was going to blow up all the federal buildings in Arizona, and there were bombs found, and they had over 70 automatic weapons, all of it lies. You see, this is propaganda, ladies and gentlemen. When these charges are brought, they know they're false. All they want is for the press to demonize patriots and militia in this country. And just recently, ladies and gentlemen, in Clarksburg, West Virginia, it's happened again. Leaders of the West Virginia Mountaineer Militia were arrested for planning to destroy the FBI's Criminal Justice Information Services Division complex in Clarksburg, about 80 miles south of Pittsburgh, and 2 other government buildings in West Virginia. What do you want to bet this turns out to be just like Georgia and Phoenix? And by the way, the group in Phoenix, known as the Vipers, was not a militia, was never a militia, never claimed to be a militia, was not associated with any militias in the state of Arizona. It was a motorcycle club. How about that? Recently, they found some children engaged in delinquency at a school, and they called them a militia in the press. Now, if you've been paying attention to your newspapers, you will notice that every bad group of people anywhere in the world is now called a militia. This is a well thought out, well-planned propaganda attack upon the American people and the militias and the patriots that live in this country, a la the old Soviet Union in their best propaganda attempts. Never did it any better than this. And since those in charge destroying this country are communists and socialists, they were probably taught by the best that the old Soviet Union had. Because Joseph McCarthy was right, ladies and gentlemen, all the way down the line. He was absolutely correct. This government had been infiltrated and was in the process of being destroyed from within by the international Marxist socialist machine run from Moscow. And since the fall of the Iron Curtain and the so-called split up of the Soviet Union, which is itself a deception, ladies and gentlemen, admitted by Mikhail Gorbachev and some of the top Soviet generals have admitted it. Those who have had access to the archives say that the Soviet archives prove that Joseph McCarthy was right, down to the exact number of communist agents that he said had infiltrated our government. It was confirmed that all of the communists who had been tried and put in jail at the great liberal socialist newspaper establishment claimed were railroaded, they weren't guilty, really were guilty, really were communists, really are communists, and deserve exactly what they got. And you have no idea how far this has gone, ladies and gentlemen. It has gone so far that in a school in Phoenix, Arizona, the Valley View Elementary School, in the Roosevelt Elementary School District, the principal proposed that they have a morning ceremony before school. Before school, ladies and gentlemen, where anybody who wanted to could come and they could all say the Pledge of Allegiance together. Guess what? The school teachers are up in arms against this. You see, the school teachers say they are citizens of the world, not of the United States. They want to devalue United States citizenship, and they want to foster disrespect for the nation that, despite its glaring flaws, is the very best in the world. They say they see no purpose for a patriotic ritual when the flag is a symbol of discrimination. Can you believe that? These are school teachers that are teaching our children. They claim that they are citizens of the world, not of the United States. And I say, if they're not citizens of the United States of America, round up their ugly asses and put them on a boat and kick them the hell out of this country. And the quicker we do it, the better. Let them be citizens of the world, somewhere else in the world. Here we have citizens of the United States of America and citizens of the states. They don't like state citizenship either, ladies and gentlemen. You know, it's voluntary. Any student that didn't want to, or any member of the community that didn't want to, didn't have to show up and say the pledge. Nobody was being forced. But guess what? The Arizona Repulsive, which is one of the two socialist newspapers, one of the only two newspapers we have in Phoenix, Arizona, both socialist, both owned by the same organization, by the way. One pretends to be conservative. You see, all across the country, ladies and gentlemen, in every city, there's at least two papers. One will pretend to be conservative, and the other one is really socialist. Both of them really are socialist, if you really read them and understand what's going on. In the Arizona Repulsive, in a cartoon called Benson's View, it shows Hitler standing with his arm raised to the American flag, with Far Reich on an armband around his sleeve, holding a little child in a death grip, and it says, quote, "I force allegiance to my flag of the Gestapo States of America. Stand up straight, kid, and to the repression for which it stands, one mindset and a threat undiscussable. Keep that hand over your heart, punk. With discrimination and injustice for some, like them no-good poor and minority folk," end quote. You see what these scum-sucking, puke-faced, socialist, rabid dogs do to the truth? The truth was an American principle. Put forth an idea whereby anyone in the community, students, parents, community leaders, anybody who wanted to come to the school, before school started in the morning, and just have a little flag-raising ceremony and say the Pledge of Allegiance, could do so if they wished. No one was forced to come or would be forced to come. The teachers got up in arms and threatened to walk out, claiming that they are citizens of the world, not of the United States of America. And you wonder why your children are so screwed up? And then the Arizona Repulsive prints this disgusting cartoon, which is a total lie. You see, you have to know the truth, ladies and gentlemen. You must know the truth. You know that all around the country in courts of law, parents who take schools to court for violating the rights of the parents and of their children are being told by judges that they lose their rights to their children when they drop them off at school. That's correct. How can that happen? Well, it is happening in America spelled with a K. I could go through the Constitution for the United States of America, article by article, point by point, and show you, ladies and gentlemen, that we are not the United States of America that you always thought that we were. That if the Constitution is truly in effect, it is not effect in this country. And judges in courtrooms all across the land are telling people who cite the Constitution that if they do it again in their court, they will be cited for contempt and thrown in jail. Doors are broken down without search warrants. The military is used in law enforcement and military weapons and machinery. No state tenders in payment of debt, gold, or silver coin. You are not safe and secure in your papers, possessions, or in your cells. Nor is your home, nor your car, nor anything else. You do not have the right to travel unimpeded, unrestricted, because they can stop you and arrest you at the slightest provocation, and even without provocation, anytime they want, anywhere they want. Unconstitutional? You bet your life it is. And that's another reason why the Constitution is not in effect. Is the Constitution the supreme law of the land? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is. It is. It is ignored. It has been thrown into the trash can. It is disregarded. It is stepped on. It is vilified. And anyone who believes in it is called a terrorist. You don't want to call yourself a constitutionist today, ladies and gentlemen. For as in Cicero's Rome, if you do, you will be quickly and eventually dispatched, unless you have the guts to stand up and fight. So I want you all to know that when I sit here and tell you the facts as they really are in the real world, that I'm not trying to discourage you, I'm not trying to send you into fits of depression, I'm not trying to take away your hope or your will. I'm trying my very best to give you the situation as it really is, so that whatever despair it is going to cause you, it will cause you, and you will recover from it, and then you can join with the rest of us in the real battle. Not the phony battle spinning around in some little eddy by the side of the stream as the real current rushes by. Not the eddy of spinning around on your couch, writing letters endlessly over and over again that get no result. Have you seen the latest Bob Dole commercial for why we should elect him to the presidency of the United States of America? See his wife sitting there saying that Bob Dole wouldn't lie to you. Bob Dole is a man of his word, and he will never go back on his word. And she is lying to you when she says it. He has always gone back on his word. Isn't it Bob Dole that promised us that NAFTA would not pass? Trust Bob Dole, he said. I will make sure it does not get through the Senate. Isn't it Bob Dole that said GATT would not pass? Trust me, he said. I will make sure that GATT does not get through the Senate. Isn't it Bob Dole that when he was nominated and gave his acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention said that he was going to go after the WTO, the World Trade Organization, because it was bad for America? And he couldn't understand how such a thing had ever happened. It was Bob Dole who did it. Bob Dole is a liar. And you have to understand these things. Why can he blatantly lie like that and get away with it? Because the average sheeple has an attention span of probably 30 seconds, and that's why most television and radio commercials are exactly 30 seconds in length. So they know they can lie to you over and over and over again, because 3 days later nobody, except a very few of us, will ever remember it or care about it. Because everybody else has just moved on to some other distraction. And they've forgotten about it. They're too busy having a party. Or figuring out how to get laid. Or how to get more money at their job without really doing anything more for it. All the while complaining and castigating their boss and their employer for paying them that paycheck for doing as little as they do. Isn't it amazing? What galls me, ladies and gentlemen, is that those of us who are really fighting this battle and putting the lives of ourselves and our families in danger because of it are doing it for so many people who don't even care and don't deserve it. And probably really should be enslaved, if you want to know the truth. It's really quite disgusting, in my humble estimation. What do you think? Just recently, ladies and gentlemen, in Pennsylvania, Steve Ames and his wife lost their 2 children. Why? Well, because they instructed them in politics and religion. Yes, I said it right, ladies and gentlemen. They read to them from the Bible, and they told them the truth about the Federal Reserve, amongst other things.
Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt, and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on December the 4th, 2016. I can remember being interviewed in the late 90s, and the host asked me if I could leave the people with some optimism. And I said, well, I can't really, because I don't see my role in life as being a cheerleader for the masses. The problem being, of course, is that I know the masses are always used in every era, in every nation too, by those who rule it. And even when there's a changeover of those who rule, they still get all used and abused as well. And they most of them go to their deaths never knowing it. They think whatever happens in their lives, it just happened out of the blue. Nothing is further from the truth. Everything that happens on any major scale in life is well planned, well orchestrated. It has to get permission to be introduced and put
into society or onto society to change society by those who already own society. And I clued into that a long time ago when I was going over the causes of World War I and then World War II. Now, most of the causes of World War I are only now beginning to be told, the actual real causes. During your whole lifetime, I've said this so many times, you're fed constant disinformation your entire life long about major things. You get bits of stories. You'll never get the whole story, which might not be that long, but it can completely change your view on what has happened or is to happen or whatever. A completely different spin or take on any particular subject or topic. Most media simply omits the juicy bits that fills in all the blank bits. And often, they present what's left there as the complete story. So people don't think beyond that. Like, I wonder why that's really happening, or who benefits, or anything like that. That's how the world is really structured and run. And now you take it a system that can literally have different players involved in major events, like a war, a world war. We know that these odd organizations based in London primarily, not necessarily of Londoners either, but we know that they started up philanthropic organizations. We know they had big ambitions of creating world empires. And we know too that they owned newspapers to again get lots of support for their big ideals. And often they would write many articles, in fact, which would appeal to everybody. It's hard, for instance, to not be nice about certain things. How can you not be nice about certain things which you all have in common? So you'd fall for this and fall for that, but never realizing there was a big organization behind all of this that needed your psychological support, because down the road they're going to use you in warfare. Like the Lord Alfred Milner Group, for instance, that had its outer party of round table societies. The Cecil Rhodes Foundation joined them, and the round table societies where they try to get the educated class, the middle classes, educated classes, on board with them, where they could set up a world empire system using the British empire system of the day, and expand that into a global empire. But they also had their inner party as well, where only the elite members knew each other at the very top. Whenever you get that kind of thing going on, there's something else going on behind it, which really stinks. Secrecy will always stink. If something cannot face the light of day and public scrutiny, then it's nefarious in some way or other. You'll find most of history in the last over 100 years has been like that, when it comes to any real truth or bits and pieces of the truth. It is nefarious. There are huge powers at play. You take it, people who claim to be philanthropists and have the best of intentions for humanity, under whatever guise they happen to use at the time, like, bettering people across the world, enlightening those in the darkness, etc., across the planet. It sounds wonderful, but what they're really after is they loot the countries for themselves and their own families and their own groups. But they told the public they wanted to help the working class and downtrodden people across the world. That's why they used the British Army to go across the planet on their behalf of these private philanthropic organizations and subjugate all the people to force them into civilization, as they called it, and plundered them at the same time. But they used the military to do all the dirty work and the heavy work, and the taxpayer funded it all. And because they lived in democracy where they did all these choices. And they also made sure that they could cultivate in those they'd leave behind in those countries eventually to emulate the British very, very hush-hush kind of system of ruling the nation. And they'd have a club, an international club, which would be the beginnings of a world society club, or even a government for that matter. That's what the Commonwealth of Nations was all about. Lord Alfred Milner coined that term rather than keep the old term of the British Dominion across the world. Nothing is ever as it's presented to the public. Now remember, this organization could and did plan world wars in their own writings. And through all that would transpire in world wars, they would so weaken and terrify nations that they'd go on their knees and they say, please take away this burden of being a nation, this nationalism, take it away from us and rule us. And that's what they wished to do. It sounds very simplistic, doesn't it? But these same people had the power to bring on the wars. And they had special divisions of them working through universities, and people that were recruited directly from universities into think tanks to work out through all the different statistics, etc., how people could behave if you stimulated them this way or that way or whatever, but also how many males would have to be slaughtered to bring down the population. Now you'll find, if you talk to ministries, every British Commonwealth country has a ministry of everything pretty well, run by the government, and you have ministries of natural resources and things like that, which also are in charge of wildlife, and occasionally they'll have their own culls of deer, or whatever it happens to be, and they have all this long rigmarole of, is it best to kill off the buck or the cow? And they go through a whole, again, bureaucratic rigmarole of how many females a buck could inseminate, as opposed to the cow and so on. But so anyway, they give it the tags every year, and they even use their own members in the ministry to do a lot of the culls. Well, that's an old idea that existed before World War I or World War II. And they were using that, of course, for Britain as well. And many other countries got involved in that world war. Cull off a good population, in fact, most of the population of one generation of a middle class, the working classes, and bingo, down comes the population very quickly. But also you have gone is what the communists knew. Those who would keep the old system going, the nation itself, the culture, the history, all that kind of stuff that makes up the nation, that would be gone as well. Because the first thing that communists did was to slaughter what they called the middle classes. And they boasted about, we have eliminated a class. That was genocide. And they replaced it with another people from other countries to be the new intelligentsia. When you find big things happening in the world, they have things in common with other big things that are happening in the world, you better believe they are definitely connected. And we know that H.G. Wells, that worked for these international groups, because he was a propagandist for them, wrote about the fact that they had not given up their sovereignty after World War I. He says, we need another world war. And he belonged to the Fabian Society, where their job was to pretend they were going to be on the side of the working class. But in reality, if you read their writings, they wanted to run the world scientifically, including birth rate, or even if you should get born at all. If you lived in a certain part of the country, for instance, and they needed so many miners down the road in 20, 30 years' time, they might breed some. But if they didn't, then they would simply not allow you to breed. That was the scientific method that became eventually mixed up with technocracy. It all comes together, all this stuff. It's an old idea, different names, same thing. Same movement, actually. And the big philanthropists, again, that funded it all were the Bill Gates types of their own era. It's odd, isn't it, that suddenly when you become awfully rich and famous, whether it's by using other folks' patents or inventions or whatever it happens to be, and being utterly ruthless to make sure that they can't come back at you and complain about it, and you become awfully well known, then you suddenly wake up one morning and say, gee, I'm a philanthropist today. I want to help the poor, especially Haiti. Haiti is a country that all seem to suddenly want to help. I might touch on some of that today, I don't know. But they want to do that, and they also want to use science, again, being good technocrats, remember, and transhumanists, because it all ties together, folks. But they want to use science to inoculate everybody against all kinds of things, even bad thoughts, and wicked thoughts and unapproved thoughts. Eventually you'll get vaccinations for that too. But you just wake up one morning after slaughtering through the business world, and believe you me, the psychopaths run the business world at the top and get up there. If they're not already part of the CIA structure, and most of the big corporations in the US are actually fronts and run by the same organization, the CIA. Go into the history of it. Go into the history of MI6 in Britain and see they had munitions factories and everything for special weaponry, all that kind of stuff. But they also went into electronics big time as well. Everything is interrelated, and everything is different from the way that you've been taught to perceive things, including your cultural changes. But anyway, you just wake up one morning, I want to help people. And it's almost the same way as you want to help them get all vaccinated, regardless of whether it works or not, or whether even through the World Health Organization they admit they've been spreading polio across the planet with live vaccines and so on, things like that, and causing massive paralysis, etc., wherever they go. Doesn't matter. See, facts don't matter. Facts don't matter when it comes to the rah-rah cheerleading thing, where big smiling faces are on all the posters of happy, healthy people who obviously are from a different country and they're not getting all the jabs that they plan to stick in you, or they wouldn't be all smiling and happy. But that's how the world is really run. It's all by perception. It's always been perception management. Always, long before the 20th century, 21st century. Long before perception management. That's why you get bits and pieces of things, but never the full explanation of anything. Never, ever. Remember those at the top, these great philanthropists and so on, that own the countries and run the countries, finances, manufacturing of all kinds, but massive businesses, international loan sharks and all that kind of stuff. They do it all, are also the top philanthropists, you see. As I say, you just get to a certain level of money, and bingo, you wake up like that. You'd be the same if you were into that kind of thing. You spend years and years and years sinking countries, helping to finance wars, to take down countries, to grab resources and things, all that kind of thing. But then you just wake up one day when you hit that magic number, and you say, I don't need to do this anymore, I want to help people. And it's always vaccinations, and it's always, again, work for women across the planet. By giving them old, used, rubbishy computers that maybe don't even work, things like that. And so on it goes, because all fronts are other things. All fronts. When I was small, they always had wars going on, of course, across the world, because there's always big plans for the whole planet by those who own it, really. And they can't give you peace, because if they give you peace, you might start to enjoy life. And if you enjoy life, you might think, well, it's not too bad, let's have rights. And when they try to change something, you dig your heels in and you don't like it, because you're quite happy the way things are. So they can't give you peace, keep you always on the edge and keep you worrying about, keep telling you that change is inevitable. And it's easy to change, and you go along with it, whether you like it or not. Quite simple. All these ideas are well studied, well studied. And they have courses of them at a very high level, but not for ordinary people at universities. When you look at, for instance, at the little bits they allow you out nowadays to do with, say, World War II, little bits. They can't tell you everything, like all the deceptions they did during World Wars. Otherwise, folk who lost relatives and so on might get rather unhappy about it, terribly unhappy, in fact. and want some kind of revenge, or at the very least payback, like financial. So they can never tell you the truth about things, but they can do it after most folk have died off. And that's why they have Official Secrets Act and certain term limits for truth. It happens, every country's got it, same system. Because whatever you're taught from government at a very top level is never the truth in your lifetime. It can't be given. It cannot be given to you. And when you look at what they did, for instance, during the Cold War, and even World War II before that, from Britain and the US and so on, they had counterintelligence agencies where they employed men and women who were good at lying. They had an innate understanding of natural psychology and human behavior. They also had the professionals on board with them too, but in that area, you don't have to be a professional. I think we're all professionals if you think at all. You're a natural professional. And they knew how to use psychological warfare on, say, the German people, for instance, and then the Japanese people. Today, they actually employ, in the US government and Britain and so on, they actually employ different scientists, behaviorists, anthropologists to do with the cultures of the people you want to invade or take down or whatever, and find ways of taking them down. But so you understand their psyche. But during World War II, they told the Germans through leaflets and so on that were passed out to Germans out in the front lines that back home manpower was getting so short that Hitler had decreed that every German woman, that was their sweethearts and their fiancés, their wives, had to give themselves openly to other men to breed up the population. So they're all busy back home, keeping warm, you might say. And that was to create dissension amongst the ranks. And they also told them that because of that, if they could leave and go back home for the young guys who were single, they'd have a fantastic time back home. So they're all demanding leave to go back home from the fronts. These techniques don't end and did not start with wars. You have professional departments working inside the culture industry at all times, creating the culture on behalf of the masters who have big plans for the world, altering everything on behalf of their masters who know where they want to take the planet and where they want to have the public psychologically, they never want you to be psychologically healthy. And they know that when they give you a lot of things, they mandate it through law and various other things to be unhealthy, then they've got a dysfunctional society. When it's dysfunctional, they can ram changes through very, very quickly because folk can't stay together. They've all got petty little differences, you see, which are often created by the boys behind the scenes, these differences, and even promoted into youngsters' brains through education and various things like that. Nothing really is as it seems. That's how it really, really works. And I really mean that. Massive coordination worldwide. Massive. Above the politicians, obviously. Above them. Because it's far more important to have an organization above the politics that's always directing and ensuring that the way ahead to their goals is right on track. And that are on course with it. Now, countless things going on all the time in your lifetime that you're given rather shallow, at the very least minimum explanations for why things happen. But during the Cold War, for instance, they make a big deal about the Cambridge spies, the guys who came out of Cambridge in the late 20s, early 30s, and went through World War II, and then were still spies for Russia after that, because of the big Marxist push that was getting pushed through. Now, when you run a country that ran the world at that time, like Britain, I hate to use the term Britain, the British folk didn't run a darn thing. The most things that they would run for was a bus, if they were lucky to have one in their area. They were kept on almost wartime rations, even when it wasn't war, for the working classes. And that's no exaggeration. It was scientifically designed. How much money a man should make in a working class family. Doesn't matter what kind of work he did, by the way. You find it worked out pretty well the same. And most folk rented their accommodations. But as I say, you had all this spy stuff getting set up, supposedly, and wars to fight. And you find some of the folk that went through, again, the Oxford and Cambridge, mainly Cambridge at that particular time, became spies and they were from the aristocracy, a lot of them, or at least the very upward mobile middle classes at the top. And to this day, a lot of folk are confused as to why they did it all. There's turned out countless books on it, countless documentaries on it, some movies on it and so on. They definitely had homosexual elements in it, to do with the fact that they could recruit other people of the same persuasion in other countries. That was the idea. But apart from that, and big drug taking and drinking and all the rest of it, all of that kind of stuff. But think about it. Here are people from a higher class of Britain, guaranteed positions all through government, into aristocracy even. And in fact, I think one or two of them were knighted. And yet, supposedly, they stuck to to being secret agents for most of their adult lives. Because what? Because they've been radicalized when they're at university. Who radicalized them? Well, you find, here again is this powerful nation, Britain, with its own secret intelligence service, made up of the aristocracy at that time, and yet they allowed in these people who became professors at their top Ivy League universities from other countries of Europe to preach and teach Marxism, the overthrow of all established governments, elimination of all monarchies and so on, and they allowed that to happen in a country like Britain that still has a monarchy even today, and they were just allowed to do it. Do you really believe that rubbish? Do you really believe that rubbish? There's more to it, obviously, than that. Because any rational country, if it was all as they put it across to be, you could not allow people to radicalize students, especially at that level, who advocated the overthrow of your established order. It would not be allowed. It isn't today. But it was allowed back then. Why? What's going on here? What big game's afoot? Huh? What big game is it? Because it's definitely a big game. And what you're getting told doesn't make any sense. When something doesn't make sense, there's obviously another part of the story will never be told. But do you really believe that these characters, from some of the so-called best families, wealthy families too, really just care so much about the working people across the world that they're going to sell out their own country, including the working folk, and to another country that was going to eradicate millions of them, like it had already done in the Soviet Union. But they're going to do it all because they like the working man. Now, even if you stretch it and say, okay, Britain was bad at that time, with as fascistic as a term as it goes, and there was a ruling class that gouged the public and treated them like cattle, which was awfully true. They did not believe in upward mobility from the working classes back then. And they already had the same corrupt system we still have today. But it's meant to be this way. That's why they always say it. Where the big bankers can plunder you at least twice a century. The money disappears, we're told, to money heaven. And those guys that are closer to God than other folks have the keys, obviously. It doesn't just disappear. But it's done over and over again, and whatever pretended laws they bring in to help reduce it happening are nonsense. It's a joke. But anyway, so here you have in Britain these guys that did what? Sold out their country. Each time the groups, and there's always genuine groups, say an MI6 or whatever it happens to be at the time, and the SOE and different things, they sent out real operatives to infiltrate all those countries. And here's people like Kim Philby telling them where they're going to arrive, land, and so on, and they were executed. This is a guy without a conscience, but he cares about the working man. Who's kidding who? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense, then there's something else behind it all, obviously. Obviously. And the very fact that pretty well all got away with it, and other ones were eventually pardoned and so on, it tells me something really stinks with the whole darn story. Some really stinks. I've always said the Cold War was a bit of a farce to begin with. It was fantastic for, like all wars are, cold or hot, for the manufacturers of the high-tech weapons industries, etc. Tremendously lucrative indeed. And during war, as Professor Carol Quigley said, who was a historian for the American branch of the Royal Institute of International Affairs Club, then you find that you can get more done in 5 years of war than 50 years of peace, because you do what you're told during war. The government will slap on so many restrictions and everything, and you won't say boo because you think we're fighting for our lives. You see, quite simple. But they never stop, they do. That's why they love crisis, and now we've got war against incoming meteorites. We've got war against the weather going to turn us all and kill us all. Yada, 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 yada. But we're always the problem. It's always us. It's the problem, no matter what it happens to be. In fact, if they really change it a little bit and say, we're going to change it all for incoming meteorites to save us, they'll claim that we're causing them to come in. But we've got some kind of strange magnetites inside of us that attract outer space meteorites to come into the planet. So we've got to pay up mightily so that governments can save you from it all. That's how it goes. Everything's a racket. And it's always a group, a big group, makes a lot of money off it. But there's also a lot of dedicated, fanatical, mad, quite mad, foot soldiers who will back them up. They're so mad, they don't want to know the truth. They want to believe it's all true. They want to really, really believe it's all true. Yep, there really are magnetites, and you humans are we've got an awful lot of them, and we're bringing in all these foreign meteorites that would happily wander throughout the universe, but they're getting attracted to us because we're magnetic to them. Now you try and argue with these folk, and they'll lynch you. Because it's easy to create fanatics out of folk that are on the border edge anyway of sanity. And in every generation you got them. And the big boys at the top know this, and they know how to create them, and how to select them, and how to use them. And you've got armies of them today in all areas of what's called dysfunction, where you create dysfunction through all of society. And with dysfunction, you have dissatisfaction. And with all of that, you have retaliation, and so on. The Hegelian process is really working very, very well. Now, sometimes, not very often, you get a deeper insight into how these agencies work on behalf of governments. And sometimes, very, very incredibly rarely, you'll find someone will give more out in a very clever fashion, often through fiction, as an analogy or analogous to what's really happening, how things really do work. And we all know about George Orwell's writings, and he has fiction and non-fiction there, of course. How else could a guy let things be known to the general public without committing treason? He, remember, had been radicalized, you might say. Well, he was at university. He came from a family that were traditionally bureaucrats, or at that level for the British government and for the British Empire. we know that Animal Farm gave an awfully good insight into the system, including the system of how you can be led up the garden path by falling into being one of the masses for revolutionary purposes, used by a different group for their own purposes without you ever coming to that conclusion yourself. Awfully good it is. And if you were to take, for instance, the farmers as being the existing ruling class of, say, monarchy and aristocracy, then the pigs are the ones who come in with expertise to the country, in a sense, and teach you communism and your rights, and they get you to revolt and take over. Then this group puts itself in charge of you then, as intelligentsia. And at the very end of it all, the animals look through the window pane of the old farmhouse, and there's the farmers making deals and having a booze up and a great meal with the pigs. That was showing you a system of the creation of revolutions where the animals, the general population, must believe it's all real in order to be used, but never knowing the real purposes behind it, believing intently to their deaths, literally many of them, that what they're fighting for is all real, and it's for themselves. And for each other, you see. They think that's what you really believe when you're getting used like that. You must really truly believe in it all. Now we're talking about the folk who create world wars doing that. Whole nations are taught to send their sons off to get slaughtered, which they did in World War I and II. And it was to change the whole of society intentionally, because then you would get the women back home into the workforce. Again, the communists dreamed of that. They wrote books about it and so on. And to get them out of the routine of getting married and having children. Destruction of the family unit, the state becomes God, and they do what they're told. And you got a cheap working force then in all the factories as well. It's all working together like that, isn't it? You can understand the perfection of it all. And I'm talking about the perfection that most folk never figure it out. Never ever figure it out. That they've been used from the beginning to the end. They never know it. So you have a system which has trained the public. I'm talking about now and back then. The system they present themselves to be is all genuinely real as it is presented to you. And that they'd never do anything nefarious to the general population that they're there to protect. That's how it's presented to you. Meanwhile, just like today, those at the very top are lucky to even, or they'd probably say unlucky if they've ever actually met a working person in reality. They don't mix with you. They don't know what you think or anything else, or care to know. That's just the way it really is. Today, the new philanthropists, all frontmen, by the way, they're all classified as geniuses. Nonsense, not rubbish. They're front folk for bigger organizations that do all that stuff. And they're philanthropists. And because they're philanthropists, they want to help the world. You have the George Soros creating and fomenting revolutions across the planet and getting away with it. What does that tell you? What does it tell you? He's part of an organization based inside the US. You might call it the CIA. You can call it whatever you want. Because most of the organizations that are there working on your behalf are not really there caring much about you at all, to be honest with you. The US CIA were the ones who recruited all the different guys for the culture industry. They created the culture industry for the whole of post-World War II Europe and America. They wrote books about it. And it's so odd that their culture industry was also to destroy the family unit and so all the things that made you functional. And it looked awfully like the communist system too. When you look at, isn't that rather coincidental? Now, getting back to George Orwell, he talked about his life during World War II as a propagandist for the British government. And how his job at one point, and it was a pretty high-level job, it wasn't just bringing in occasional people to discuss new ways of cooking condemned meat, if you had any meat at all, because that's really what it was. It was all stuff that wasn't fit for human consumption, but his job was to get folk to convince the public, because it does wonders, convincing folk, that this is healthier for you, and it's going to do you, and they get all the experts to tell you, prattle off all the different minerals, and just like you do when they're selling stuff today, and how wonderful this is, and it'll make you live forever. You're healthier than you've ever been before. And all the cases of malnutrition you saw around you were carefully, by government decree, kept away into special hospitals across the nation for rickets, etc., and all the things that children were getting because of malnourishment. That wasn't talked about at all. You'd never eaten as well as you were during World War II in extreme rationing. And that was one of Orwell's jobs, but he had a big job in coordinating people across the world in what was still the British Empire, all the way into India for propaganda purposes. So he knew his job awfully, awfully well. He knew about, for instance, the big agenda to depopulate a good part of Europe. Because he had been as a student, under the tutelage of, or the tutorialship of Aldous Huxley for a period. Also his brother, Julian Huxley, they all knew each other, these people. And Julian Huxley was up at UNESCO eventually, which became UNESCO, for Planned Parenthood, depopulate Europe, etc. All of those kind of things. They all knew each other. And they all worked for the upper class. There's far more to it all than has ever been obviously admitted from the top. What we're given for history is very simplistic. Here's the bad guys. We fought against them. We lost X amount of people, and they lost X amount of people. And that's how it's presented to us. The preparation for war, even to get a war started, it takes forever. It's a long, long process. But we're all taught that things were just spontaneous. Just like that. Just like that. It's like the US with its nonsense of the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. For years, the US had been trying to corral into a small area Japan. Because the US magnates, those who really control and own the US inside, were eyeing up all the raw resources across the Pacific back then too. And they were determined not to let Japan get anything out of it. And Japan did what they knew they'd do. They retaliated and attacked. If they were getting blocked out of places, they'd simply attack. That's what they did. And everybody knew it was coming in the high levels of the US intelligence services. In fact, it was meant to happen. And so, nothing really happens, to say, spontaneously. It doesn't happen. In the big picture at all. Government has always been in charge. I'm talking about real government, not what you vote in, or you think you vote in. Has always been in charge on a very high level. And anyone who believes in politics too, that they're really so important that they can change the world for the better. They get reminded that they're not the bosses. Generally not fatally. Like Reagan got a reminder that he wasn't the boss. And things go ahead smoothly afterwards, and the big boys at the top are obviously quite happy. If you were to look at all the things that have happened, the major things that have happened in your lifetime, and you've got an understanding of the articles that were written about all the things that were supposedly happening in your lifetime, which are really articles about telling you what you should be thinking about. That's really what it is, you see, because all news is politicized. And the greatest display of this happened recently with the Trump and Clinton elections on the go in the States, where the media came out so openly, completely biased. Supposedly unbiased media is completely biased. I mean, completely biased. And people will forget that right away. They're back into what the news is saying. The news, if it's completely politicized, you aren't going to get any factual, here's the facts news. It's not going to happen. But it's never really happened in your lifetime, to be honest. Look at all the crisis, the Vietnam era and the wars there. And before that, they had the Korean War on the go. And the big threat was communism and the Soviet system and overthrows and the Cold War and all that kind of thing. And on it goes. And meanwhile, the wars were happening back home. The real war of the destruction of the family unit by design, by your own agencies, as I say. Britain was exactly the same. And with the pretense that garage bands, guys priced in their garages. Most folk in Britain didn't have a garage because most of them, when I grew up, didn't have a car. But this is the rubbish they fed the public as they presented these guys shuffling around on stage, miming to something, because none could play live, as the new phenomena. Your whole life has been run by tricksters, including the cultural takedown of society. As you were told, the Soviets were going to take you over completely and be marching up and down the country and all that stuff. Believe you me, the longer you live, if you live long enough, you'll see all of this. And it doesn't stop the present lies coming out for the next generation, the next generation, the next generation. Constant nonsense. So you've gone through, or you're going to get taken over by the Russians, the Soviet system. Oh, we're all going to get dire plagues, but all the usual stuff which they always bring out every few years. Oh, dire plagues, die this, die that. All the threats and fears and so on. The real crisis of economic depressions, which they bring on when they decide it's time to do it and plunder you. Which again brings on changes, because they then blow off the dust off the old treaties they've got to amalgamate countries with other countries even more so. And then you end up with the EU system, the biggest mafia-run system on the planet. And it's not Italian-run, for that matter. But we're always living through big agendas, way above the governmental level that you know of. And most politicians know of. Politicians get up there because they've played the game. They've been well sussed out from the beginning when they volunteer for charity work. That's how they get into these little things. And they know not to ask questions. If they have a good mentor, don't ask questions. And that's how you get up the ladder. And you're dependable. You don't ask questions. You just do what you're told, and that's it. And that's how the whole system is run, because way above it all is another system entirely that really does run it and plans the future. You think about all the things that have happened. Big wars, the creation of famines across the world, the testing of bacterium for plagues, all these things. And you've had world wars and all the other ones which are not classified as war. They were called policing actions. They didn't like to use the term wars anymore. It sounds better. I haven't had wars for years. Meanwhile, you're all over the world having the policing actions where you're sending soldiers dressed as soldiers with weapons and grenades and everything else. Everything's perception management again. But you go from all of that, and all the way along as you amalgamate your nations, they keep telling you you're getting freer and freer as you're actually getting poorer and poorer as they pull all your resources together for the big boys to plunder. They keep telling you you're getting freer. And meanwhile, under the guise of terrorism everywhere, then they're taking all your rights away from you. And everything you say, or almost what you think, is being monitored by Big Brother on a world basis. And we're accepting it all under the guise of, it's to save us. They have to take our rights away to save us. And believe you me, if you have no rights, then nothing's going to save you. So we're constantly played with on a massive scale. Mind you, we've got so much entertainment based around the most basic things, obviously. It's always sex, 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 sex. And when everything else fails too, when there's nothing else to distract you, to give you what's put across there to you as something you should all be concerned with. Again, and it's always based on what? Sex, 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 sex. Do you understand you're being played with mightily? Mightily. From world wars to the Cold War, which was a world war, and so on and so on, all the way down to what's the news today as we get all our rights taken from us to keep us safe. What is the main news? And here's an example of it, what I'm talking about here. Do you really believe this is news? You've got, this is Canada, lesbian professor slams colleague. And the colleague is the man I've mentioned before, a University of Toronto professor. And it says, for resisting transgender speech. She doesn't want to use it, getting told what to use. But her own classes were filled with hate speech. This is like something, a massive soap opera, isn't it? And it says, November 28th, 2016, it says a lesbian academic who accused Toronto free speech advocate Jordan Peterson of hate speech. And you think about it, would you ever have read this 20 years ago? The lesbian academic who accused Toronto free speech advocate. So being a free speech advocate today is bad. So she accused advocate Jordan Peterson of hate speech. So having free speech is called hate speech now. Bear listen to what I'm saying here, because as you're put through this mishmash, this maze of bending thought, all this stuff is going somewhere by very bright folk way above all of this stuff that we're talking about. So taught a course full, so she taught, the lesbian woman, I guess, full of misandry. I'm surprised they haven't banned that. Who is misandry, right? Joking. Or hatred of men, according to her former student. The student who took a fourth-year course at the University of British Columbia from Mary Kay Bryson in 1991 told National Post columnist Christy Blatchford she'd taken other women's studies courses but never been in a class where misandry was taught to you. Well, I'll tell you one thing, it's taught big time in the US universities. It has been for years. Anyway, Bryson, a senior associate dean and professor of education at the University of British Columbia, was one of two people brought in for a forum this month at the University of Toronto to challenge. So here's what they do now. They bring them in to challenge someone's opinion. It's to challenge psychology professor Jordan Peterson's claims that federal and provincial human rights legislation and University of Toronto anti-discrimination measures were dangerous attacks on free speech. Can you believe this? Everyone's getting bent upside down and so on and so on. But that's the intention of it all. The other opponent to Peterson's actions confined herself to trying to prove that Bill C-16, which would protect transgender and gender-fluid persons. Can you live long enough to keep learning all this stuff? It's really important to learn all this stuff. You know? From hate speech was a reasonable measure. But Bryson engaged in an ad hominem attacks on Peterson for using his privileged position to attack the precarious minority of transgender and gender-fluid persons. Why does the majority have to alter everything, even the way it speaks, or even talks, or thinks? Because of a tiny minority. And the government's making you do it. Isn't there something else at play here? Of course there is. And it says, he did this, she said, with assertions that had never been submitted to the scrutiny of peer-reviewed journals, and was therefore in total dereliction of his academic duty. Now listen to this. But as a reporter, Christine Blatchford revealed in a front-page column on Friday's National Post, Bryson now stands accused of bullying heterosexual and bisexual students in a 1991 course called From the Margins, Lesbian Subjects Matter. So this female professor, I guess, or teacher, is accused of this now. The one who's doing the accusing is actually accused of it now herself. The student, reports Blatchford, claimed that Bryson forced his students to declare their sexual orientations, liked to spring violent pornography on them,
and taught them that all sex with men is inherently violent. And you're looking at a politicized agenda, and this is only one tiny little part of it, with the radicalization of various aspects through society and put them into professorial jobs. All the days from the early Marxist professors have flooded into Europe and elsewhere in the early 20th century. This is just a continuation of the same thing that leaves everybody scratching their heads, really. But it's a big agenda. All sex with men is inherently violent. You see. Bryson, through her lawyer, has denied she forced her students, who were all female, to reveal their sexual orientation, or that she taught all sex with men was violent. That's an old thing they've been saying. The emotions are violent by looking at them. That's what they claim. So she admitted that one guest presenter did drop her pants. Can you believe this is all to do with what you can say and you can't say anymore, or think about, or not even not want to think about? It's going to get forced down you anyway. She admitted that one of her guest presenter, I guess in one of her courses, did drop her pants to reveal a strap-on dildo. This is university. But insisted this was done without her complicity, and that moreover she intervened quickly as possible to stop the demonstration. Another presentation featured a movie showing women fisting each other anally, which Bryson also admits, while insisting the filmed activity was consensual and the film was a work of art and not exploitation. Well, I guess there's lots of folk who make a complete ass of themselves. The complaining student who contacted Blatchford after the columnist wrote about Peterson's debate with Bryson graduated from University of British Columbia with a master's in religious studies. Imagine getting taught all that, going into religious studies, see? She says Bryson and her co-teacher Suzanne de Castell mocked those of us who liked men, who'd had intimate relations with men, and for shaving their legs or wearing skirts. So if you tried to act like what often is appealing to men, they'd mock you. Imagine, she told Blatchford, a male professor forcing female students, if you can imagine this the other way around, to watch violent pornography, or inviting a male guest speaker to drop his pants to expose himself to students, or telling students how to dress for his class, and forcing them to publicly announce their grooming habits and their sexual orientation. Well, it's different strokes for different folks, as they say, and it's not always good for the gander, and etc., etc. While Bryson, via her lawyer, denies all coercive activities, her own description of the course, and in an essay she wrote with de Castell in 1993, reveals a thorough enough knowledge of the distribution of sexual preferences amongst her 15 students for her to make value-laden judgments of how the three different preferences, hetero, homo, and bisexual, affected class performance. What are they teaching? You understand, you're looking at people who are dying to get into universities and who can't afford it, from working class people. And never mind, pay for board and everything else on top of all of that. You just can't do it. And meanwhile, this is what they're doing with academic time, is teaching this kind of stuff. See, the war that started a long time ago is still on the go. It's still on the big time now. Yep. It says the heterosexual students, it was clearly the instructor's view, just didn't get it. Only the students whose lives were constructed within oppression. So you got to be. Everybody's vying now to be the most oppressed. Victimhood is a big part of today's society and academia, apparently. So you have to be there, as I say, to know how bad it really is. So the heterosexual students just didn't get it. Only the students whose lives were constructed within oppression could effectively engage in the work we had prescribed for our course. The heterosexuals, in other words, treated lesbianism as an academic subject, while the lesbian and bisexual students treated it as a chance to team up for class projects and after-class social alliances.
Students were subjected to a parade of presenters from Vancouver's dense LGBT culture and assigned activities such as using the popular game show Jeopardy as a model for a pseudo-positivistic, overtly ironic game of facts we know about lesbians. Students had to use another show, The Dating Game, as a framework to parody the standard women's studies survey course on lesbians through history by imagining a date between lesbians of different eras. Anyway, as I'm getting back to what I'm trying to talk about tonight, the war is always going on, and most of the public are utterly ignorant of what the war even is. Much, much higher minds decide everything that goes on in the world. So why is everything geared at trying to make folk, just the general public, grit their teeth all the time? Why is that? It's done on purpose, obviously. And then it obviously is meant to coincide with this article, breaking Ontario, Canada, unanimously passes radical LGBT bill redefining parent-child relationship. I thought they already had all that stuff. And it says Bill 28, which redefines the family to appease LGBTQ activists, was passed unanimously in the Ontario Legislature Tuesday by 79 MPPs from all three parties, with 28 members of Parliament absent for the vote. And it says, according to the Campaign Life Coalition, Progressive Conservative leader Patrick Brown pressurizes MPPs to either vote for the bill or absent themselves. The pro-family groups have criticised the Liberal government for ramming through the controversial All Families Are Equal Act. It completely turns on its head the former understanding of family, which consisted of individuals united by marriage, blood and adoption, noted Gwen Landolt of Real Women in October 16 critique. The All Families Are Equal Act legally redefines mother and father as parent to accommodate homosexual couples who conceive children through reproductive means. It gets rid of mother and father in family law, mum entirely, to allow for a purely contractual relationship between up to 4 adult parents and the children that are legally identified as theirs, noted Dr. Scott Masson in an analysis of the bill. Now remember what I mentioned about technocracy. They were to recreate everything in society, in life, in human relationships, even to what a human is. That's all transhumanism, folks, and this is all part of it too. Getting you all used to the idea that nothing is standard, nothing is normal of any kind in human affairs, relationships, or anything else. And you're getting prepared step by step for all that is to come. It's all part of the way it is done. Because your whole life, you're being trained by powers you don't even know exist. And for objects which you don't even know exist either, even when you're living through them. Well, really, I could go on and on and on, and I might continue this next week, I don't know. But from myself, Alan Watt from Ontario, Canada, it's good night to me. Your God or your gods go with you.
You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Well, folks,